by
The Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
And what a beautiful day it is in Athens, Georgia, as we hit the penultimate weekend of the college football season. They call it Cupcake Weekend in the SEC, but if you're the University of Georgia, you would take great exception to that. Texas A&M, still a very good team, comes into town, and we welcome you to Athens. Second time we've been here this year. The first time, South Carolina game, the Dogs lost. We don't want to bring bad luck, but tomorrow is a very difficult game. We'll spend a lot of time talking about that and some of the people that we'll be talking with about it as well. Let's get to some headlines from this day. And Alabama no longer plans to redshirt the other Tagovailoa. Tua's little brother, who is a freshman, has played 4 games, so he may be called on tomorrow against Western Carolina and perhaps against Auburn and who knows where else, as Alabama tries to fight its way back into the playoff picture. Keith Carter would get the job. He did. He's the former executive director of the Athletic Association. He's a former basketball player, an All-American, and he will officially replace Ross Bjork, who is now in the vicinity of where we are, working for Texas A&M. When we come to Athens, we do not disappoint. We have a lot of major guests to share with you today. Start with Tebow, and then we'll make our way around the SEC to go to Auburn with Alyssa. We'll have Coach Jim Donnan on set, Greg McElroy, who is covering the LSU game, Jordan Rodgers, who is at Missouri, where Tennessee tries to let its presence be known. Vince Thompson, the renowned sports marketeur. Laura Rutledge. Yes, Kirby Smart. Always nice with his time. He'll be by in about 2.5 hours right here on our set. Mike Griffith. That's always must-see TV. And the former All-American here, Rennie Curran. We'll also get to your phone calls in just a moment at 855-242-7285. I want to address something that occurred here last night. We were having a conversation about the college football playoff and about its chairman, Rob Mullins, who is the athletic director at the University of Oregon. And I have been critical of the process. I have been critical of the fact that Mr. Mullins is representing Oregon as the athletic director, although officially he's not representing them as the chairman of the college football playoff. And I said some things that quite frankly were wrong and inappropriate. And this morning on the way over to Athens, I called Rob Mullins out in Oregon and personally apologized to him, telling him that it doesn't matter what I intended to say. I am responsible for what I said. He was magnanimous in accepting my apology. We both agreed to get together soon and hope to get to know each other better, because he could not have been kinder in receiving my call, and I could not have been more incorrect in what I had to say about him last night. So let's move on and take your phone calls at 855-242-7285. And let's go to North Carolina, and Byrne is up next. Go right ahead.
Paul. It's your boy Bird, man.
How are you?
Hey, what I tell you about them dogs, Paul. Now we got one more good one before we get to LSU in the championship. I mean, in the SEC championship. But what did I tell you, Paul?
Honestly, I do not remember. Tell us what you told me.
Well, Paul, I'm the caller who called last Friday. I was defending my boy Mike Griffin.
Okay.
And everybody was doubting them dogs, Paul. Not you. You actually set the record straight against me.
Listen, Bird. I thank you for the call, by the way. When Georgia lost to South Carolina, I was on the program up in New York with I think it was Dan Orlowski, and And he said the Dogs were done. And I said, I don't think so. I've watched this before with Kirby Smart. I saw it last year. And even though it was hard to explain a path back, I did have faith in Kirby. I happen to think he's one of the best coaches in college football. And so far, so good if you're a Dog fan. Thank you very much. Let's go to San Antonio next. Go right ahead.
Hey, what's up, Mr. Paul Finebaum? I'm sorry I haven't called the show lately. I've been busy with my tutor.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear everything's going well.
Thank you, Paul. Look, I know a lot of people are judging us and thinking we're not going to beat Georgia. But, Paul, this is like our Super Bowl. And I know we haven't beat a lot of teams on our schedule like Clemson, Alabama, including Auburn. But, Paul, this is like our Super Bowl, and we really need this win. And, Paul, I got a feeling that we're going to go to Athens, Georgia, and we're going to beat the Georgia Bulldogs, Paul. And we're going to pull out a W against Georgia.
Well, Matt, listen, I don't know whether you're right or wrong, but I do think it is certainly within the realm of possibility. Always good to hear from you. Best of luck, Matt. And Michael is up next in Florida. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
We are doing great. Thanks a lot.
I need to get something out there that I've been trying to tell tons of people for forever, and nobody believes me. And that is, as soon as Alabama lost to LSU, I immediately said they're in big, big trouble for the playoffs, and they need help. And that was regardless of the Tua injury. That just kind of makes things worse now. But the reason I say that is because, we all know the playoff committee is being tasked with picking the best for football teams. But actions speak louder than words. So let's look at the actions. If you look at the last 5 years, they've always given it to the four most deserving teams more than really the best four. We've seen a team in Alabama's position before where they didn't make the conference title game. They're clearly better than some teams that are going to make the playoffs. But if a team has a slightly better record, maybe a conference championship, they get the nod. Now, this year it's weird because it's Alabama that might be that one-loss team that's sitting out there. But I really think a one-loss Oregon, Utah, Oklahoma, or even Baylor is going to get selected over them just because of what the committee's done in the past. I mean, how do you explain Washington getting in 2016 over 2015 Ohio State team getting left out when they had them favored over Michigan State, who they lost to, and to Oklahoma? We know Ohio State would have put a better fight against Alabama that year than.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate your passion. Unfortunately, the connection was not great, so maybe we can work on that. John is up next in Atlanta. Hello, John.
Hello, Paul. How are you? Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you very much.
Definitely. I just wanted to ask you two things. I'm a long-time USC Trojan fan, and before I go to the Oregon thing, I just wanted to ask you on what you think the Trojans would need to do in terms of getting back to maybe winning 10, 11 games, whether it's coaching, better recruiting, with your knowledge and expertise. What do you think the USC Trojans need to do to get back to the level they once were?
Well, listen, I think they need a change, and I know this season has turned out better than expected, but sometimes you just have to make a change and set a new path.
Right.
And I just don't think Helton is the right coach.
I agree.
And if he stays, you're going to be here next year going, okay, if he wins this game. Sometimes things are just inevitable. And I think that's one of those cases. So who's the best choice? I think you need somebody that's very capable of running a big-time program. And that's either someone who's done it before or someone who is ascending. I really have not kept up with this in the last couple of days where the school is, but I'm pretty sure come Sunday there'll be at least an announcement that a new coach is coming.
I agree. For the second question, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think your nightmare doomsday playoff scenario would be? Would it be maybe somehow?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with our phones today. We unfortunately lost two really good callers in a row. We'll see what the answer there is. The bottom line is in terms of a doomsday scenario. I mean, there are a lot of them. They would include maybe Texas A&M beating both LSU and Georgia, Oregon and Utah losing this weekend, Ohio State losing. I mean, there are quite a few scenarios out there. Anyway, we are going to take a break. We will try to get these calls.
We want to affect the outcome of our own program and how we play and what we do and what we get out of that. I mean, we want to affect our program by how we play, and hopefully we've learned from the games earlier in the year of how to approach those games and understand the level of ball you have to play at.
If you get their focus on playing better and getting better, especially the second part of your roster, because we got twos that are having to play now. And so now this week, more twos are going to play. The next week, maybe more twos are going to play because you got more guys getting injured. So how do I get the rest of my roster better is really all we focus on.
It's going to be nothing but a great learning experience here, but something hopefully we've learned and we've played well this last month, and we keep November rolling and play well good football. But it's important for our program. I mean, not just to play playoffs is wonderful, but I'm worried about what's going on at A&M.
We welcome you back. We are live in Athens, and certainly anticipatory of tomorrow's big game between A&M and Georgia. We're back here on set. Tim Tebow, always great with coming up and spending some time with us. And one of the unique parts of being Tim Tebow is you get to spend time with quarterbacks. I know you've done this a lot this year, but today you came from meeting with Jake Fromm. I think the audience would love to hear your impression.
Well, first of all, I think he's a wonderful kid. He's a great kid. He's been a great leader. And you look at what he's done, and I just don't think this gets enough credit. Back to back SEC championship games. I mean, he's the first quarterback to do that since Danny Werfel. Wow. That deserves a lot of credit, and I think it gets lost a little bit because he doesn't put up the same stats that Tua puts up, or Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, some other guys. But when Jake has a great game and a perfect game in this offense, he's not going to have the same stats. It's not designed to have the same stats, and so I don't think that we can look at it and compare stats and say, okay, he doesn't have the touchdowns, he doesn't have the yards, he doesn't have all these other things, but what he's asked to do, he does it at a very high level where I still think he's one of the better players in college football.
Well, I want to ask you about just to characterize him and describe him, because there is a lot of, I think, misinterpretation of what he does because of the system. Explain to all of us who don't know it like you do.
First of all, you don't have it's a system where it's complementary football. He's not asked to go in the shotgun, play no huddle, and go score 45 points. He's asked to run his system. Doesn't mean that it's any less than Joe Burrow or Tua, but it's to be able to manage. It's to go to the line. It's to check. It's to be a great leader. It's to have a high completion percentage. It's to keep the ball away from the opposing team. It's all of these things, and their goal is to be able to put it all together. Obviously, score touchdowns. That is the goal, but it's not just to score as fast as possible. There's a different goal in mind than the fast-paced RPO of Alabama or LSU and Joe Burrow. They're different systems. This is a system that Kirby's put into play. I think if you put Jake in another system, I think he'll succeed at that. But he's running this, and he's running it at a very high level.
People around this program, Tim, always talk about some of the things you can't see, and they point to his leadership skills.
Yeah.
You understand that maybe better than anyone.
Well, he is a really great leader, and I think it starts with him by really serving his teammates. He does a great job of that. He does a great job of it. Him and his girlfriend to make cookies for him, or they go out of their way, or they help him. And I think he's really become even more of a leader because also what he's gone through in the public's eye with him and Jacob Eason and then Justin Fields and being a consistent guy. And we talked about this last week. Greatness isn't just showing up one time. It's consistently doing something well over and over and over again. That's what Jake Fromm has done. That's who he is. And you look at him, and there's very few games you can look back and say, oh, wow, he didn't show up in that game. And even South Carolina, he didn't get helped by his receivers and by a lot of other people. And sure, has he made some mistakes? Absolutely. But he is for the last 3 years, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and he shows up every single week. And that's where I think you can see that consistency in his game and who he is.
Tim, we've not seen you since last Saturday, and of course everyone knows what happened late Saturday afternoon with Tua, and your reaction to there's so many levels of Tua being in the game, staying in the game. I'm really interested in what you have to say about the whole thing.
Last Saturday morning we were talking on our show on SEC Nation in the morning, and my thought was I wouldn't have him play for a lot of reasons, but I would just have to rest him and have Mac Jones play, and then be able to get him ready for the Iron Bowl. But I also don't knock Coach Saban at all. He was doing what he thought was right for his team, and he's the best in the history of college football and ever doing it. So I don't agree with the people that are knocking him either. He was trying to do what was right. Tua was pleading for it, and it's just a freak thing, a freak accident. And but I think the one thing about it that's special is how Tua has handled it, because I do believe that sometimes you can turn the greatest test in your life into a testimony, and Tua is doing that with how he is acting. And I was texting with him Saturday night, only a few hours after he got injured, and he's saying things to encourage me about it. And I think if you listen to Coach Saban's, I called on him to encourage him, he encouraged me. I called him the next day to encourage him, he encouraged me. Tua is not only is a special player, he's a special young man. The perspective that he has, and I think that it's unfortunate, it's a tragedy, it's disappointing for him, but I think that Tua is going to handle it as gracefully as almost anybody could.
Tim, I want to close by talking about something extremely personal. You shared some news this week that really quite frankly devastated almost everyone who saw it. And I'm no more unique than everyone out there. We've all lost special dogs. And you talked about Bronco, and I didn't know Bronco. I think I met him at your house, and he seemed like a lovable dog. But I don't know. So many people are just really upset about this, and I know you are, of course, upset because he was your dog.
I think if you've ever been attached to a pet, then they're so close. They're like family to you. And I know that's what Bronco was to me and my entire family. And before we were letting him go, the whole family, literally all over the world, was FaceTiming in to say bye to him. And it's like it's part of your family. And but I think it's also you're grateful for the joy that they bring for so long, and obviously it's a really hard loss, and it's devastating to me and a lot of my family, and there's a lot of tears with it, but at the same time we can remember all the joy, and I think that's one of the things that pets really bring.
Yeah, and I do now remember that night at your house, and hey, listen, every dog is unique.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't matter what they look like. We all think we have the
prettiest, the cutest.
I hear my wife talking to our dog, and I'm like thinking, how does she? I answer about to answer my own question. She thinks this dog is so cute. Then again, she married me, so her eyesight could not be very good. But I just I don't want to overdo this, but I think sometimes maybe you don't even appreciate or realize the effect that you have, because I've heard from countless people who don't know you and certainly didn't know Bronco, but they all were affected in different ways.
I'll tell you what, I think he affected a lot of people just in sharing his story, and all the people that got to meet him when I brought him to SEC Nation, when you get to come to the house and see him. I think that's one of the things about sometimes pets and their unconditional love and the joy that they bring is it's contagious, and it truly does affect people and really does change them.
Well, it can make even the most cantankerous people likable at a very short time. Tim, I know you got a lot to do. As always, thanks for coming by and sharing such a personal story.
Thank you.
We'll take a break. We are live in Athens. We have a lot more to do. We'll do a whip around. Brody Miller covers the beat for The Athletic. Brody, thank you. Great to have you on. Can you please tell us what's going on with this latest off-the-field situation, especially with Divinity? Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you doing? Yeah, so it's a situation where, obviously he left the team, as you know, the week of the Alabama week. And Ed Ogeron said it was for personal reasons and whatnot, which is kind of a vague reason they give for a lot of different issues that can mean a wide range of things. Now that he's back, Ed Ogeron said on the radio this week and on his teleconference this week that he's back on the team, but he will not be able to play. He gave the date of the earliest him being able to return would be a hypothetical national championship game, which kind of confirms what most of us had been hearing around this beat, that, he was going to be suspended for about 6 games for disciplinary reasons. He was already planned to be suspended or held out for 3 games this season before this latest issue, and now it was going to be 6 games, and now I think they're bringing him back, which really comes down to more of a want to help the kid out, want him to be around the team, think that'd be better for him, better for preparing for the draft and the NFL and all these things of actually working with the team every day. Also, I think it will help the team in a lot of ways, having, one of the more vocal IQ guys on the team kind of around every day. But, I mean, it's still a fluid situation. I don't think anything's completely ironed out, but Michael Devaney is not expected to play anytime soon.
So I saw something that he could be eligible if LSU makes it to the national championship game. Is that possible?
Yes, that is what Ed Ogeron said on the teleconference this week, which goes back to, from the date that he was taken off the team, he was going to be held out for 6 more games this season, which would line up with the timeline of national championship game. There are so many areas where this defense has been fantastic, and so many spots where you have to give them credit. Shutting out Florida the final 25 minutes of that game. I mean, Auburn's not a great offense, but holding them consistently all game in a top 10 matchup. I think you have to give them a lot of credit for the fact that they held Alabama to 6 points of offense on for what it's worth, a kind of fluky touchdown in the first half and 2 yards per carry. They have spots where they look really great, and then they have spots where they gave up 28 in the second half to Alabama. They had a 28-3 lead on Ole Miss, and Ole Miss just broke explosive play after explosive play. Some tackling issues, maybe a little bit of fatigue issues where this up-tempo offense has a factor in there. I think there's a lot of things that are kind of coming together to make this happen, but I just tend to prefer to judge a defense by how it looks in the games where it's really locked in. And I think it's a good defense. It's not a great one. It's not as good as Ohio State's, Clemson's, or Georgia's, or any of these teams, but I think it's a top 25 defense.
We welcome you back. We're glad you're here. We are in Athens, Georgia. A number of guests to come. We'll head to Auburn and Baton Rouge here in the next few minutes. Coach Jim Donnan will join us as well. Let's get back to the calls. A great conversation with Tim, and what a moving tribute to his dog, Bronco. I know that touched so many people. I've already heard from a number of you. Seth is up next. Seth, go right ahead.
Hey, how you doing today, Paul?
Thank you. Great to have you on.
Yeah, Paul, just a quick question. I noticed you've gone on a couple of shows and talked about how atrocious LSU's defense is. But, I'd like to argue that without a couple of late touchdowns that came in garbage time with backup players, we actually don't have that bad of a defense. You give up 2 late touchdowns to Vanderbilt, 38 to Texas, second game of the year, and 2 touchdowns to Alabama on absolute blown coverages. And Ole Miss put up 400 yards rushing on us, but they also put up 300 yards rushing on Alabama.
Sure.
But no one seems to care about how bad their defense is.
Well, but here's the only thing I would ask you. I mean, if it's happened once or twice, but it seems like it's happening every game.
Every game, it's happened 3 times, Paul. 3 times.
Well, I mean, listen, when I talk about games, I'm talking about the important games. I'm not talking about the tomato cans. I mean, you mentioned Texas, you mentioned Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Alabama.
Absolutely. But when it comes to LSU's defense versus Alabama's defense, Alabama gave up 300 yards rushing to Ole Miss.
Listen,
well.
I'm not arguing. I mean, LSU's defense is challenged. I mean, Alabama's defense is dreadful at times.
True. All I would say is,
but we're talking about a team that's number 1 in the country right now. That's the reason why there is some scrutiny. Seth, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Austin is up next. Good afternoon, Austin.
You might laugh at me, but I love college football, and I really love the Tier 2 Power 5 games. I think those are the best games to watch. On that note, like I said, you might laugh. What do you think about Dave Clawson at Wake Forest for a potential big-time job one day?
I'm not laughing at all. In fact, I have heard some people in the industry talk about Dave and that maybe he wouldn't leave because of some circumstances that are important to him in Winston-Salem. But I think Tennessee tried to hire him a couple of years ago.
He was the OC for, I guess, under Fulmer's last year.
Yeah, he's a very good coach.
Good coach, and he's been everywhere he's been. He's rebuilt. He got to Wake; they were 3-9. Are they great this year? No. Clemson's always in that division, but for lack of better words, he's turned chicken crap into nicer chicken crap.
You're absolutely right. He's done a great job.
So that's about it. Somebody's got to be the next man up, and you can only talk about so many people.
No, listen, Austin, you raised a coach that I think a lot of people would like to have. Hey, thank you for the call. Walt is up next. Walt is in Arkansas. Good afternoon.
Hey, how you doing? Glad to get in. Just wondered, in your opinion, who would be the best coach available in the season to go after for Arkansas?
Well, I mean, listen, I think when you talk about who I think is the best fit there, it would be Gus Malzahn. He's a proven coach. He understands. He's been there before. He's from that, went there. I mean, I think he's the best coach you could get. Now, I have no idea whether he's gettable.
Yeah, he seems to like it in Auburn until they turn on him and boot him out the door.
Well, I've argued over and over again that in the next couple of days may prove one way or the other. But if you do a reasonably good job, which he has, and people still don't appreciate you, why stay?
Yeah, you know what they did to Tommy Tuberville.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do remember. Tommy Tuberville had beaten Alabama 6 years in a row, but the problem with Tuberville is that the program took a nosedive, and his final year was an absolute disgrace.
You think Coach from Memphis would be a good team?
I know he doesn't mention that when he's running for office, but I covered it.
No. Yeah, he's probably not going to mention that one.
No. When you don't listen. I mean, Tuberville has been a friend of mine for a long time. Could he have turned it around at Auburn? Maybe, but it is a fact that 3 years after he was fired, they won a national championship. Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. John is up next. John, thank you. Good afternoon. How are you? John, you there?
Good afternoon, Paul. Yes, good afternoon, Paul.
Thank you. Great to have you on.
Hey, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I just wanted to say thanks to you and your listeners for 2 or 3 pretty important things. Number one, about this time 6 years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to move back to the Southland. You know how you do with your career and whatnot. You move all over the country and you sort of lose your roots. So we were able to come back 6 years ago. I tuned into a number of your programs, and I realized from your listeners and from your call-in program just how much I had missed being at home. And so as I hear the things you talk about and the way you discuss them, it is really good to be back. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody listening for making a Southern boy feel Southern again.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear for all of us here.
There's a couple other things if you got a minute. Number one is, one thing I've always admired about you, Paul, is the fact that you're always so gracious and so respectful to your listeners. Hey, listen, no matter who calls in, no matter where they rate on the knucklehead meter, as I call it, you're always so good to them, and I've always admired that. But now with those 2 things said, what I'm really calling about, and I think you'll know where I'm going very quickly here, is about your tweet from yesterday, the one relating to Plumlee and to Tua, and your comment that faith is more important than football.
Well, listen, John, thank you very much for saying that. Let me make sure the audience understands. I don't think I'm smart enough to come up with that comment. That comment came from Plumlee when he was on the program. He was talking about Tua, and that's what he said. So please, thanks for giving me credit for something I didn't do, but I can't accept it. It was John Rice Plumlee who said that.
Paul, you know what? I guess at the end of the day, whether it's the players or yourself or whoever, we all realize that God has given us a platform, big, little, in between, you, me, and all your callers. And those kids are something special. For them to take that platform and say, okay, I understand this is about something bigger than me, their family has got to be proud. And I also wanted to tell you.
Yeah, John, let me read that for those who didn't hear it. When John Rice Plumlee was on this program, we asked him about Tua. And he said he's a great player and you hate to see him get hurt, but his identity isn't in football. I think anyone can see his identity is in Christ.
Paul, again, for the record here, when kids like that take a stand, they understand what it's all about. They realize it's something bigger. And I just want to say amen to them, amen to you for using your platform like you do. They're making more difference than they know. You're making more difference than you know. And I just want to say happy Thanksgiving from our house to yours. And again, God bless you.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic call that was. Thanks, Sean. Really do appreciate it. We're up against a break. We are live in Athens. Many more guests to come. We'll start making our way around the SEC to preview some of the.
We had a really, really good opportunity coming in with the number one ranked team coming into Oxford, and so we really wanted to make a statement and get some momentum here in Oxford, And so everybody really likes to see what I did, but I can't do it by myself, And so if you go back and watch the film, the O-line strained all night. They really gave us a push when we needed to, and Jerrion and Snoop had a really, really big night, drawing the defense to them. And so when I pulled the ball, made it really, really easy on me with the receivers blocking downfield for me and everything. And so good team effort. We just we came up short. You just kind of say a little prayer for him. I saw it before our game started. We hadn't left the hotel in Tupelo yet. Headed to Oxford, and so I was watching the game, and I saw he went down, and then I saw later in the game the ambulance showed up, and so just said a little prayer for him because being in this situation, he's a really, really good player. I think everybody can see that, but it's a tough situation to be in. When you get injured when he's having such a great year, and you hate to see it. But I know that his identity isn't in football. I think that everybody can see that his identity is in Christ, and so I think. He's going to bounce back and recover quickly and hopefully see him do big things. When baseball season rolls around, that we can be prepared and not be so far behind the ball, and we can catch up pretty quickly. And so we've been working at it. Mainly right now we're really focused on football, though, since we're in football season, but just keeping the rust off, really, our swings.
Is there more pressure on you playing the piano or trying to deal with Derek Brown and the Auburn defense?
I don't know. I think it kind of helps you in both ways, and being able to perform, Growing up, I've always been a performer, whether it be on the football field or the baseball field or whatever I was doing, or in the, performing in front of people at a concert or piano. And so I've always liked to be in front of people and show them what I can do and display the blessings that God has bestowed upon me. And so I think they're probably about even. They're not much far apart.
Well, I have to hand it to you. I mean, you blow me away here with some of these answers.
This is the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
We welcome you back. We are glad you're here, and it's a pleasure to have Alyssa Lang join us as we start to look ahead to some of tomorrow's big games. Alyssa is in Auburn, Samford coming to town. So, Alyssa, certainly Auburn is going to be able to take care of Samford, but give us the mindset of the Auburn team and that campus a week after a difficult loss to Georgia and a week ahead before Alabama shows up.
Yeah, Paul, we asked Coach Gus Malzahn what the focus will be going into a game like Samford. I think the last time I checked, they're a 7-touchdown favorite against Samford. And Gus said that really the goal is to just go in and play Auburn football, and that's good, clean, consistent ball. He felt like they had a good chance against Georgia last week, that it came down all the way to it. We saw Auburn come back big in the fourth quarter. He said if the ball bounces a couple different ways, we have a chance to win that game. So they're happy with how they've been playing, but they also know there's room for improvement. We talked to Bo Nix this afternoon as well. He's constantly on a learning experience throughout this freshman year he's having in the SEC. He says every week he learns something new, and that won't be any exception tomorrow against Samford.
When you play a game like this, sandwiched between your two biggest rivals, I realize you can't do anything about it. You have to play the game, but what are you trying to get out of it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things, especially for Auburn offensively. We know what they can do defensively. We've seen that defensive line just terrorize quarterbacks across the SEC. With a new wrinkle on offense to be able to execute things more cleanly, especially for Bo Nix, to be able to go through his progressions, to stay calm, to stay in the pocket and play Auburn football and be able to continue to learn this Auburn offense. We've seen him pick it up fairly quickly so far this year, but in a game like tomorrow, they'll really be able to treat it like a good practice experience, a good experience to get Bo some reps, and as well as some of their backups. We'll probably see Cord Sandberg come in as well, the backup quarterback who hasn't had any really time to get any reps at all this year. So it'll be a good opportunity for Auburn to make sure that they're playing their best ball going into a week that's huge for them, the Iron Bowl in 2 weeks.
Alyssa Lang covering the Samford-Auburn game. 26 years ago, Auburn stole Samford's coach, Terry Bowden. And they ended up leading Auburn to a perfect record the next year. So there's a little bit of history. I think Jimbo Fisher was on his staff. Thank you very much, Alyssa. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Paul.
So we are going to get back to your phone calls at 855-242-7285. And James is up next in Tennessee. Hello, James.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing today?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my first time calling. I met you at a Tennessee and Alabama game, I think, a year before last in Knoxville. And just as soon as SEC Nation went off, me and my daughter hollered at you, and you came over and talked to us, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for mentioning that.
I got two questions. Well, one question and one story. With this year's Alabama team, I think I heard you say yesterday or day before yesterday, there's 19 seniors that is leaving after this year. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
What do you think next year looks like?
Well, I think it all depends on who the quarterback is, and I think these next few weeks are critical. You know, is it going to be Mac Jones? Will it be the freshman from California who everyone is raving about? Don't forget, there's always that possibility somebody could be a graduate transfer, a la Joe Burrow. So you know, I think it's still it's almost impossible to know. I do know one thing: the schedule is going to be much more difficult, just from a conference standpoint. Georgia will be at home. LSU is going to be on the road. I can't remember who Alabama's opening game is. I know it's I think. So Alabama opens next year against USC. Impossible to tell really how good they'll be, assuming they have a new coach. So already that schedule sounds more ominous. Yeah, more ominous than this year.
Hello?
Yeah, I think again, thanks for the call. We are, who knows what's going on here. But we're having some difficulty with callers. But Doug is up next in South Carolina. Hello, Doug.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We're doing great. Thank you for the call.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say when I watched Coach Kiffin a few weeks back on your show, he said that if I'm not mistaken, that they recruited Hurts, Tua, and Matt Jones at the same time.
That is correct.
Well,
no. I think Hurts was a year before.
Okay. Well, it seems to me like a great offensive-minded coach like Coach Kiffin. He wouldn't recruit a weed between two flowers. So Matt Jones obviously must have some kind of athletic ability. He just hasn't been able to get it, showcased yet because he ain't had no time. But I think Alabama fans ought to give him a chance because the kid might turn out to be really good. And
listen, hey, Doug, hold on a second. Doug, it's not. Thanks for the call. It's not a matter of whether Alabama fans give him a chance or not. He has an opportunity tomorrow, and he has the biggest opportunity of his career next week. So there'll be enormous pressure on him against Auburn if he succeeds. Certainly, much will be said about him, and let's hope he has a good game. Thank you. Keith is up next in Oklahoma. Hello, Keith.
Hey, how you doing, Paul? Hey,
thank you.
I've got an opinion, and everybody's got one. It's mainly to do with Clemson, and I watched Tuesday night where they picked the Final Four, and all they talk about is strength of schedule, resume. But none of them ever say anything about Clemson's schedule. Then you have Georgia sitting there, who got beat by South Carolina. Alabama got beat by number one, and they're below them. I don't understand that. But my main problem is you win a national title, you automatically get in the Final Four. Because Clemson, they about got beat 2-point conversion by North Carolina. They'd have won. But nobody on that show says anything about their schedule on that Tuesday night.
Well, you have to remember, listen, that show is to reveal the top 25. I've heard, I was on that show the week before, and I'm pretty sure I heard some reference to to schedules. I mean, they break everything down. So, I mean, it just at some point there's only so much you can say about Clemson's schedule. Now, the reason why I don't think you're hearing much about Clemson's schedule is because they have, since the North Carolina game, they have performed at such a high level, albeit against crummy opposition, but they still have played very well.
Hey, appreciate your show.
Thank you very much. Jim is up next. Jim, good afternoon. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Paul. Before I get to my question, I do appreciate you with what you said about A.D. Mullen. There's one thing that we've come across, at least I've been calling for 8 years now, that I've noticed is you have no problem coming back and admitting when you feel you're wrong, regardless whether they think you're wrong or not. And I appreciate you greatly for that.
Well, thank you, Jim. And listen, I was wrong, and I mentioned, for those who didn't hear it, and obviously a lot of people didn't, I called Rob this morning, and we had a nice conversation, and I expressed to him my sincerest apologies. But people hear what they want to hear. There are a lot of lazy journalists out there who just pick something up and want to opine and sermonize, but that's fine. I'm wrong a lot, and I think the only way to have credibility is to fess up to it. I mean, I say a lot of things I mean, and when I say something that comes out, I mean, I still said it. There's no way of getting around it. I'm not going to equivocate. I tried to do whatever I can do to correct the mistake. So thank you for the call. We are up against.
I know a lot of people are throwing that Wisconsin win out the window, but when you look at how good Wisconsin was playing going into that game and the weather circumstances, that was a really big win. And one thing that a couple staff members told me was, look at how Justin Fields played in the second half of that game. That was a game where they were going to be forced to have him run the ball, and they didn't want to do that. And he was able to throw in windy, rainy, cold weather environment, and he did well. They boat raced Wisconsin in the second half, and that's when I think a lot of people around the country started to think that Ohio State was the most complete team in the country. But it all changes this weekend. I mean, Penn State is arguably the best team they will face to this point. They have Michigan next week. But the thing about this Penn State game is this could be the first time that this team faces real adversity. They haven't had to play in the fourth quarter to win yet. And, Ryan Day brought that up at his press conference yesterday and said, yeah, we're going to have to put this game on Justin Fields' back. And he hasn't had to do that since his junior year of high school. His teams have been so good, and obviously he was hurt during his senior year of high school. So when he was asked about that, he said, oh yeah, I'm always ready for that. But it's easier to say that you are compared to playing it. So we'll see what happens Saturday, but these guys are locked and loaded. They are very cliche with everything, 1-0 mentality. They're not worried about Michigan right now, but they know what's in front of them. I think Ohio State is the most complete team in the country. I think that LSU right now has the most exciting offense because we haven't seen it at LSU. And that's not to take anything away from him. Joe Burrow is playing lights out. I mean, he's number one on everybody's Heisman list. He should be. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is running the ball out of his mind. And people didn't even think that he was going to be the starter this season for them. The offensive line, which was the biggest question mark coming into the season, is playing better than people on that staff expected. So I think if we had seen this from LSU before, we wouldn't be as giddy about it. But because they made such an overnight transformation, people are more excited about it. And that's why I think that you're hearing so much blowback about, well, how come LSU is a number one? Look at their resume. Yes, they have a great resume, but that defense has a lot of issues. And when you play Ole Miss, and I understand emotions, it's a rivalry game. I grew up in Oxford. I understand what that game means to Ole Miss players and Ole Miss fans. But you can't let a team that bad run on you all night long. And I think that that's something that other teams are looking at when they potentially face LSU this season.
That's from Baton Rouge. Normally, LSU-Arkansas is a traditional rivalry. This year, tell us what it is, Greg. Good afternoon.
Good to be with you, Paul. Well, I think everybody's kind of anxious to see how LSU looks defensively. You heard Ed Ashoff there a second ago talking about how They really struggled with quarterback run game last week against Ole Miss, and I think it's gotten everybody's attention and really has the #1 team in the country on high alert, which is kind of unusual. We know the offense is great. We know they're going to manufacture plenty of points, but they could be facing against another mobile quarterback tomorrow, depending on who Arkansas goes with the quarterback. So they need to find some answers for the quarterback run game, or else down the road against maybe the likes of Clemson, against the likes of Ohio State, or even Georgia in the SEC championship game, they're certainly going to have to account for the run game and be a lot better than they were.
Let's stay there for a second, Greg, because everyone thinks they know what's going on or what's going wrong with LSU's defense. We're so used to elite defenses. What's different this year?
Well, I think it's a few things, Paul. I think they've had a couple guys that have been banged up. Grant Delpit hasn't been at 100% hardly at any point this season. Got a little banged up in camp and hasn't really been able to play at the All-American caliber level that we've come to expect from him. They do miss Devin White to a certain extent in the middle of the defense. And if you look at those two linebackers, they've played well and have had moments. But there's always a guy in position to make a play, Paul. But for whatever reason, they just haven't done it very consistently throughout the course of the season. Really, if you look at each individual part, the talent level is exceptionally good. The problem is that when those 11 parts come together, it hasn't necessarily lended itself to a lot of success on that side of the football. So I would expect their best performance defensively tomorrow, to be frank. I think they've worked on a lot of things over the last 5 days. They've really obviously gotten the players' attention with the performance last week. And let's give Ole Miss credit, too. Ole Miss did a lot of really interesting things with the quarterback run game last week. So they've definitely had some ups and downs. The problem is they haven't been able to put 60 minutes together, because if you look at them in 30-minute increments, there have been moments of greatness from this LSU defense. They just want to see a 60-minute performance, and I think there's a real possibility of that coming to fruition tomorrow.
Let's spend just a second, maybe not any longer than that, on Arkansas. What do you sense from Arkansas? Not so much now, but in the future. I mean, they're in the middle of a coaching search. What do you hear?
Yeah, and Paul, to be honest with you, I know Arkansas has not had the season that their fans would expect. It's not what Chad Morris expected. And if you look at their personnel, I actually think they're better than they were last year. The problem is when things have gone sideways, they haven't really had anybody that's been able to right the ship. They've been kind of changing quarterbacks. They've played 4 different guys over the course of the season, and you just can't do that, not in the SEC. And frankly, along the offensive line, they've had a lot of struggles. But if you look at their offensive skill, they have an excellent running back in Rakeem Boyd. They have really good young wide receivers, young personnel that are going to be great players in the years to come. And on the defensive side of the football, there's just not a lot of things to like right now. They don't tackle well. They don't leverage the football. They have some decent players at the second level, but for the most part, those players aren't good enough to overcompensate for some of the mistakes that get made elsewhere. So they have a lot of problems, and whoever's stepping into that job, whoever it may be, I think that they are going to be stepping into good offensive skill, but a lot of things to figure out on the defensive side.
Greg McElroy with us. Greg, let's switch over to Alabama, and we all know what the conversation has been this week. But I want to ask you, not so much tomorrow, but next week, just your assessment, having been to practice many, many times, having done their games, your assessment of Mac Jones.
I like Mac Jones, Paul. I think he's a good player. I think he's an accurate thrower. He moves around in the pocket well enough. He's not an explosive runner, but he can run if necessary. So I think there's a lot to like in his skill set. The problem is when being measured against one of the best guys in the country at that position, he's not Tua. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. He can be an effective player, but the offense is going to probably shift just a little bit to what he's most comfortable with. And if you look at the game that he started against Arkansas, a lot of it was dink and dunk. Early in the game, get him moving, get him easy completions, get him comfortable. Whereas with Tua, first play of the game against LSU, they drop back and they throw a 20-yard ball across the middle of the field in tight coverage. I mean, that's just not really a likely way to keep defenses kind of guessing. So I think it might become a little bit more predictable. But also at the same time, if Mac Jones stays within the system and relies on the skill around him, he can have success. It's just I don't know if he has a chance at this point in his career to take this offense and not have it skip a beat, having missing one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in Alabama history.
Greg, games across the board tomorrow. Samford for Auburn, Western Carolina here. I mean, you know the drill. You've been in these games. When you're a player in a game like this, I realize it's senior day. Often it's important to your family, but what are you trying to accomplish?
I don't like these games. I'll be the first one to tell you. I don't like them. I didn't like them as a player. You stay so sharp, and I know that the big guys and the guys in the trenches, they probably love them. Okay, it's not going to be as physical. But as a quarterback, I mean, you've been playing up to this level, and then it's like you get to take a sigh of relief. I think that's against human nature. At this point of the season, you want to be peaking. You want to be playing your best. You don't want to go through the motions for one game and then lose any momentum that was created in the week previous. So I didn't like these games as a player, and I don't like them now, even more so as a fan. In saying that, the thing that I always tried to work on is I tried to be perfect. I didn't want a single incompletion. When working against a lower-level competition opponent, I wanted to try to absolutely be the best I'd ever been in regards to efficiency. And we were pretty fortunate to have some games like this where we did have moments and we were playing really well through the passing game. So we try to get in rhythm, try not to do too much, try not to take any unnecessary hits, because the last thing you want to do is put yourself in harm's way by holding onto the ball, trying to make too many plays. So stay within the offense, stay in rhythm, and try to get as healthy as you can for what should be one of the biggest games of the year next week.
Greg McElroy, thank you very much. We'll be watching the game tomorrow night, Arkansas at LSU. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Paul.
Carrie is up next in Georgia. Carrie, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, hey there, Paul. How are you?
We are doing great. Thank you, Carrie.
Good. Well, I have a beef with you. You know, we spoke, I don't know, maybe a couple years ago. My husband, you know, all he does is watch your show, and it was ruining my marriage. And I come home today, and sure enough, he's sitting on the couch watching the Finebaum show. Only what's worse is that behind you is my daughter, who should be in class. So now you're not only ruining my marriage,
so
but her education at the same time.
Which one is your daughter?
The blonde
that one right there?
You in the gray sweatshirt.
That would be you.
Anna, go to class.
Go to class, your mom said. Do you have class? She said this is more important, Mom.
Oh, see, another one. I told you, Paul. You're luring my whole family into your web.
You know, I don't want to tell you what to do, but Mom, you need to join up. It's you're losing the battle of the house.
I sure am. Well, thanks a lot, Paul. Anna, go to class. We'll see you later.
Thank you very much, Anna.
All right.
That is pretty funny. Never had a mom tell a daughter to go to class. 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Come on, Mom, get real. We are up against a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Jim Donnan will join us shortly. A number of other guests as well. We are live in Athens.
The ability to take advantage of their name, image, likeness, or to coexist in that space with the school, which is different than pay to play. So I do believe that, you know, the Board of Governors for the NCAA just gave the nod. This is the direction we're going. There's a subcommittee out there of people smarter than me working on how we do this. I do feel strongly that we do need to kind of, you know, create the boundaries from an NCAA. I think having millions of different types of state legislation could be detrimental and not the way to go. The process that we have laid out in the NCAA is one that I think is probably the best path forward. There's a subcommittee representative of our membership working on it. They've come up with 6 principles on how they're going to take this through. They just started with getting the approval of the NCAA board to continue their work. And, you know, they're really trying to do it within a framework, and I don't have them right in front of me, but it sounds something like, you know, ensuring that we protect the integrity of the recruiting process, ensuring that we keep the amateurism model intact, and that's differentiation between pay to play, ensuring that we're doing right by the student athletes in this, and also trying to balance the needs of the schools to, you know, have their sponsorships and ability to, you know, fund the other sports and programs that they traditionally have hosted. And I think there's a future where we need to strike a balance between allowing student athletes to, you know, take advantage of their name, image, likeness, protecting the school's interests and sponsors to a large degree, as well as enforcing and regulating that recruiting area, because that's where we differ from the Olympic model and the pro model is this recruiting piece. And it's I mean, I have concerns around it. It's been the one that's been kicked around as the biggest example of, the car dealership that's going to sponsor the entire second string, fill in the blank, offensive line, whatever, and it becomes pay to play. So, there is a real concern that we need to regulate that and be cognizant of that as we go down this path.
Welcome back to the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
Welcome back. We are live here in Athens. What a day. Really kind of a nice day. Tomorrow is expected. They expect a lot of rain, so I don't know if that affects your viewing plans or your thoughts on how this game is going to go. Jim Donnan joining us a little bit later on. Jordan Rodgers, Vince Thompson. Quite a few guests, including Kirby, about an hour away from Kirby Smart. Let's take more of your calls right now at 855-242-7285. Patrick is in Charlotte. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, sir. How you doing?
We're doing great. Thanks a lot.
Good. I appreciate you taking my call. I watch the show all the time. I won't take up too much time. I want to defend Clemson a little bit. It's not our fault that Texas A&M is just a little above average. It's not our fault that Florida State, Louisville, and NC State are down. This guy from Oklahoma, their schedule in the Swiss cheese, they're out of conference. They've with Houston and UCLA. The past 8 years, I know.
Yeah, Patrick. I don't know. Maybe there's just something in the satellites today. We are having a difficult time hearing you, so we'll see if we can get you back on a better phone. Austin is up next. Good afternoon, Austin.
How you doing, Paul?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. Do you think Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State deserves another year?
Can't answer that yet, and I tell you why. I would really like to see the end of the season, and let me throw one back at you. Are you a Mississippi State fan?
No, I'm an Alabama fan, but I have a lot of friends who are Mississippi State fans, and they wanted me to ask you a question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to understand really how important next week's game is, the Egg Bowl, a week from last night. I think if he wins the Egg Bowl, he can probably skate for another year. But I think if he loses, the animus toward him from fans is going to be pretty high. Now, listen, I don't think John Cohen, the AD, wants to make a change after 2 years, primarily because this was his hire. And, it's always difficult to unload someone that was your guy. Is 2 years enough time? I think 2 years is enough to get a pretty good snapshot of what you think of Joe Moorhead. And right now, I wouldn't give him a high grade.
I agree. If they lose the Egg Bowl, I don't think he should be there anymore. That wouldn't be good.
Well, I think the problem is when you lose a game like that, and there's no – I mean, it's going to be a toss-up game. You have a difficult time going into the offseason, especially the recruiting season, with any momentum. Austin, thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Andy is up next in Ohio.
Paul, I know this is your favorite SEC week of the year.
Yeah,
does it feel like you're broadcasting from purgatory?
It is a big week, Andy. How have you been?
Oh, doing well. A little alarmed by the general overconfidence in the Buckeye faithful up here right now. I think this weekend's a little scarier, but I didn't call in to talk about the Buckeyes. I called in because I wonder, Paul, do you think this is the year that the SEC taking a week off in November, that this is finally going to bite them?
Well, I don't think this week is going to bite them. I mean, I think the damage is already done, and most of the damage is centered around Alabama.
Well, I mean, but there could have been something decent on the schedule this week. Instead, there's...
Well, Andy, I don't know how to tell you this, but if you look at the national landscape tomorrow, the second best game of the day is right here where we are. You have two ranked teams, and you don't have that anyplace else other than where you are.
A&M's ranked right now?
Yes, they are. They're ranked number 24.
All right, number 24. Although I think the people are just cowards for not putting Indiana
Now,
in
by
there.
the way, they may be. I don't know. I saw that in USA Today. They may not be right. Well, I'll have to double check and see if they're ranked in the playoff poll. But they are ranked in some poll.
Oh, they're probably
They're not ranked in the
there.
college football. They're ranked in the USA Today poll. That's their only ranking.
All right, go. I mean, heck, I'm talking to an SEC guy. We know it doesn't matter where the ranking or where the award of the college football championship comes from. We claim it in the SEC, right?
Of course.
But no, Paul. Condolences to Tua, and I've heard all the calls, and obviously he's a wonderful human being. It's a horrible thing to happen to him, but I don't understand the Alabama fans. They're already talking about how they deserve to be in the playoff, and they're trying to angle their way in.
Well, listen, Andy. I mean, these are fans. If they can't beat Auburn, it's a moot point. Doesn't make a bit of difference.
It doesn't matter if they do beat Auburn.
You will listen. I know that's the national narrative, but I've seen people break down the actual data, and it will be a different if they beat Auburn. I don't think they're going to get in, but they don't need as much help as you think they do.
Well, I tell you what, Paul. If this happened, if they they've lost their starting quarterback, and if they go in and their backup just absolutely balls out like crazy on a national stage in the conference championship game, that's the one way they deserve to get in.
Well, listen, I frankly don't think they're getting in, but I'll have nothing to do with them getting in, whether they do or not. So I know everyone wants to blame us or praise us for continuing to praise Alabama, but they can get it on their own merit.
Well, I love that my Cardale Jones reference went by unnoticed. But the last thing that I had to say, all you Alabama fans who are lobbying to get in the playoffs, I just got to remind you of one thing. If Colt McCoy hadn't gotten hurt, Thanks, Paul.
Wow, such a hater. So sad. Kathy is up next in Arkansas. Hey, Kathy.
Hey, how you doing? I'm first-time caller.
Great to hear from you, Kathy.
Okay, I have two questions. If Barry Looney can prove himself, why not give him a shot? And if you don't think he's going to be good enough, what do you think about Hugh Freeze coming to Arkansas and turning it around?
Well, listen, you're talking about an interim coach who is certainly not going to win tomorrow night, and may or may not get a win in the final day. I'm never crazy about just elevating someone just for the sake of elevating them. I happen to think Hugh Freeze is a great coach. I think Hugh Freeze would work out well if that's what you're asking me.
Do you think he could turn us around, or iffy?
I don't have any doubt Hugh Freeze could turn Arkansas around. I think he's an exceptional coach.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to take a break. More to come here. And Jim Donnan, the Hall of Fame former Georgia. Saturday. And frankly, it's more fun to watch the end of a game on Twitter than it is from one of the networks.
Can you say that one more time, Paul? I don't think I heard you.
I'll say, because it's first of all, it's a little bit faster. Not faster than the game itself.
I think it starts with just understanding, again, how powerful the tool is.
Right.
Just being mindful. Twitter is a reflection of humanity, for better or worse. So if I see you on the street and we disagree, we should be able to have a civil conversation about it. And the reality is sometimes that isn't the case. And in those instances, like, we are just laser focused on making sure that we police against those, and we just make it a safe experience. But yeah, I routinely in my team, I've got a gentleman named David Herman on my team who works with all college programs, and a young lady named Brittany Cranston who works with all talent. We sit in rooms with teams, with players, with agents, with athletes, and we say, here are do's and don'ts.
Right.
Twitter can be an amazing tool, amazing platform for you to build your brand, for you to develop brand advocates and affinities with your fans, but you just got to be smart, just like with anything else. So we really do make sure that we're in the trenches, and we handhold people to make sure that they're using it in the right ways. Ultimately, we realize that we talked about this earlier, right? Like the sports experience is changing. It went from reading the newspaper the morning after to consuming it in real time. But I think the next iteration of sports fandom and digital and social, Twitter specifically, is creating deep, immersive formats. What if you can tweet to dictate a camera angle in a game? What if you can tweet and have your tweet surfaced contextually within a live game experience? Those are the types of things, deep participatory fan engagement plays that we're thinking about. Obviously, VR and AR will play a really important role in those types of things moving forward. But people want immediate gratification. People want to dictate what they're seeing on the screen. And we've got a show called Countdown to Game Day. My Bulldogs, Maria Taylor and Dave Pollock, actually have a show that's live streamed on Twitter. We also have a show called Rankings Reaction, because we know once those college football playoff rankings get released, there's going to be a lot of hot takes, and that conversation unfolds on our platform. So we work hand in hand with partners such as ESPN and others in the space to continue to generate that dialogue, to make sure that when you hop into Twitter, it's a fun sports experience.
We welcome you back. We are live in Athens, and I've been coming over here a long time, and one of my favorite parts of coming over here is seeing my old friend. Well, not old. Well, maybe he is.
Oh, we've been friends for a long time.
All choked up because we have been close friends. And when Coach Donnan was at Georgia, the relationship was tenuous, but you were always cool. You were always respectful.
Well, I had to be, because we weren't winning enough. You'd get on me even worse. But we got going there at the end. But, hey, what a great weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs. A chance to maybe get in the playoffs, and big game going against a really good team, though. Jimbo's really turned that team around and played a very tough schedule, and I'm really concerned about it.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because when you beat Florida and you beat Auburn and Jordan-Hare, this is not really the game you're looking to have to deal with before you get ready for the SEC championship game and Georgia Tech.
Yeah, all you got to do is turn the tape on. You look at this team, Paul has won their last 4 games. The 3 losses are to really good teams that, they're playing a little bit different style now. It goes back to, I remember 1971, we were running that split back stuff, but we weren't in the shotgun. Now they got those 2 big backs, Mon back there, and he's able to run a lot of zone read, but they also got a pitch back to throw, pitch the ball to, and take a little pressure off Mon, where he's not having to handle the ball every snap and make a play. And it's just been a good coaching job by Jimbo. And of course, their defense has just played lights out lately too. 4 straight wins. I mean, we're going to have to be on an A game here tomorrow.
Yeah, listen, I've heard that used a lot. I mean, they have won 4 straight games, but not against the best teams.
Exactly, and that's something that you take a little bit of light from, just the fact that, but the teams they lost to at Clemson and really didn't play very well at all on offense, and only lost by 14, scored a bunch of points on Alabama, and but now they got the Burma Road here the next 2 weeks. They got to go to play LSU next week. So
you ever seen a school? Next week, if LSU stole number 1, that would be their 3rd number 1 for the year.
Yeah, it'd be something.
Regular season.
And if for some reason we could beat them and beat Tech and beat LSU, they would go against 3 of the top 4 teams in the playoffs if everything manifests itself. But, there's a lot of ifs out there. But the biggest thing for our football team, and I know you're going to talk to Kirby, is, we just got to put it together on offense. Our defense is playing good, and we've had so many injuries that are not just, anything in specific, but just one guy here, one guy there, and the whole unit just hadn't functioned as a whole. I think tomorrow maybe we can put it together. Of course, it's supposed to get wet, but
yes,
I'm hoping that.
How does a lot of theories on that, but it is supposed to rain all day. As a coach, the night before, that's happening. What do you do? How do you change?
The biggest difference in this rain and the one when you have been here before, we played Kentucky. I don't think you were here for that.
Way before.
But when we played Kentucky, it rained all day Friday and Saturday, so the field was so saturated. Even though it dries well, it was, and plus it was a lot colder, and they were playing at night. This is going to be like 65 or 70. And as far as what a coach would do, is you just talk to your team about ultra conservative with the ball, making sure you secure it, and they get a dry ball out there. Sometimes quarterbacks, wear gloves. I don't know. I haven't seen Jake Fromm ever do that. But there's a lot of different things you can do. But the main thing is don't give them anything easy, because it's going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Georgia's offense, Coach, because fans call in and they're critical, and you want to come back and say, hey, you're the number 4 team in the country. But how do you see that offense?
There's a lot of expectancy when you got the offensive line that we have, and even though, like I said, we've had to piecemeal it a couple of times, one guard out or another tackle out or whatever, and then Cager, our go-to receiver, has been hurt back and forth. But I think that's the main thing. Against the Power 5 teams, we've only generated over 30 points once, and you just don't expect that with all the explosive guys we have, particularly Swift and as good a passer as Fromm has been. So, but we've played around our defense and won the games. We've beaten 3 top 25 teams, really top 15. Auburn's in the top 15, and Notre Dame's right up there. And if we get against A&M, that'll be better than anybody in the country as far as big wins. So we got to win ugly sometime, and it just hasn't been as pretty as everybody would like. But maybe tomorrow we'll put it all together.
Let me bounce around a little bit. And since last Saturday, the biggest story in sports has been Tua. And you understand as a coach what goes into that. And there's been a lot of confusion. Tua wasn't going to play, and then Coach Saban asked him if he was ready to play. You know what. Players always are ready to play.
The one thing that you always have is you got a good beat on the guy through your trainer. They got Jeff Allen over, outstanding trainer, and Tua is smart enough to say, hey, if it's really bothering him, he's not going to try to go, and then Nick's not going to put him in harm's way. But at the end of the half, we've just created a monster where you got to go score all these points. They're behind the 8 ball. Exactly. They've lost to LSU. Clemson's trying to get as many points as they can get, and they're looking in the back door right now, Alabama. So, maybe they'll be able to make it. Who knows? But I hate it for Tua. I guarantee you there's not been a better pure thrower or more accurate thrower ever in this league. Tebow was a tremendous quarterback winner, Danny Werfel, all those guys, but just pure passer. He's out of sight.
A lot of other really interesting scenarios. I want to ask you about comparison. Because you're a football coach. Contemporaries of yours are sitting on this committee. If you were sitting there, let's say, in Frank Beamer's seat,
right,
and the conversation comes up, assuming Alabama gets past Auburn, and you're looking at, let's say, Oregon or Utah versus Alabama. Coach, forget the records. When you look at game film, which you and Coach Beamer,
one of the things
what do you say?
About having these coaches on the committee, I think, the coaches take the relative strengths of the conference and know, realistically, does anybody out there think that Utah and Oregon could play in the SEC and go unscathed?
Right.
But they're not in that conference. It's not their fault. Mario's done a good job. He coached at Alabama. He's got that model out there. He got some fast guys. Whittingham has done a tremendous job out there, and he's got a really good mobile quarterback. They look like SEC teams on the hoof, but at the same time, you can't penalize Alabama for the fact that they're non-conference and all that. But you go through the SEC. Same thing with Oklahoma, Baylor, all those teams. They're good football teams, but I just don't think. And I'm not biased about it. I'm trying to be. Sure. I am biased a little bit.
Listen, you coach here, but you also coach at Oklahoma.
But I think the realism is the fact that we got 4 teams in this league that nobody really would like to play if they had to, like Georgia, and you include Auburn in there too.
There's 5.
Yeah, you include Auburn too, because
by the way, Florida's not an easy win.
I'm including that. It might be that. You got in the East, you got Georgia and Florida. In the West, you got those 3.
But it just irritates me when West Coast people want to talk about what they've done out there, and you can't put Oregon in this league, but you know better than anyone how difficult it is.
Well, and you look at the what's happened over the years with those teams when they've had a chance to
Exactly.
play. I mean, Washington's done some good things, but they've really had trouble and struggle in the bowl games, and they're down this year. But as I mentioned, I really think though those two teams are as close to SEC type teams as you'll see on the West Coast. Very physical on defense, can really run. You got big time quarterbacks.
I agree with you on Mario Cristobal, but should that game on August 31st
Well,
still
it's a
haunt
different
them?
game. I heard Kirk Herbstreit say it's a lot later in the year and all, but it's got to have some measure. Just the fact that they lost to them, although it was an inexplicable loss. I don't know how Auburn was able to come back. But bottom line for me is that it's probably going to all play out. You see what Penn State does against Ohio State, which is going to be hard for them to beat them there, and then Ohio State on the road. But Clemson just looks like to me they're just lurking over there. I mean, even though they say they hadn't played anybody, I guarantee their team to me looks better offensively, more weapons. Defensively they're quicker on the perimeter. They don't have the big guys up front, but it's going to be a real Donnybrook
As a football
here.
coach, who looks like the best team in the country?
Georgia, man. I like Georgia. I think Georgia has a good shot, though, against LSU if we can get these next two. I mean, all of a sudden, Georgia Tech gets an offense like last night, scores 28 points. But we got to win
they were
these
playing
two.
your old team. That's
but here's the thing. LSU's defense, any way you look at it, there hasn't been a team in the playoff mode that hadn't been in the top 10 on defense except one team. So I think their defense is going to really be tested. Not only it won't be tomorrow, but the next in that game, and then against us in the bowl in the SEC championship game. I think they're going to really get tested by Georgia's offense because we're a running team that runs play action, and they've had a hard time stop and run. Come on, they gave up 38 to Vanderbilt. I'm a big Coach O fan, though. He should be the National Coach of the Year. Their staff's done a great job. Defensively, they just lost some good guys to the pros, and they just haven't replaced them.
A couple more minutes here with Coach Don. And, Coach, just I want to ask you kind of generally about coaches, because you've been in big jobs. Fans.
You going to ask me about the hot seat?
I am going to ask you about that.
Some of these guys are in the electric chair.
Yeah, when you're a coach in that position, there's not much you can say. There's not much you can do other than try to win. What's it like to be on that hot seat?
Well, you really don't know it sometimes. From my standpoint, I didn't know it till the day that the guy told me. But, you got to look and listen to the trends and everything. And, in the case of Gus, what a tremendous job he did early there. Always won against the East, did a pretty good job against Alabama and Georgia. But his last 5 games against the Eastern Division teams, he's lost 3 to us, he lost to Tennessee, and he lost to Florida this year. That's 0-5 against them. Then you add 2-7 against Georgia and 1-6 against, or whatever he is, against Alabama. And
he's won 2 so far.
He's going to be in a situation where at best he's going to be 4-4 this year and 3-5 last year. But this year's schedule, I take into effect, they got a heck of a football team. I don't know anybody in the country want to play that defense unless you just had to. And they got a young quarterback, and they're building a new facility. I hope he gets to stay. I mean, if he doesn't, though, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to say, well, hey, write me the check, but as a coach, you want to coach.
Yeah, you definitely do, and he's put a lot of blood and sweat in there, and he's got some great coaches like, Steele's been unbelievable. I mean, their defense has been as good as anybody's, and they got good recruiters. Rodney Garner coached with me. You hate to see any coach lose his job, and I don't like to talk about coaches on the hot seat, but certainly it's a win now, baby. I mean, you got to do it with the internet. Everybody analyzes you, and it's just.
But like somebody just asked me about the Arkansas job. Who would be a good fit? This program has been. Tennessee's been the same way, but maybe they've turned it around up there.
Yeah, I think he's done a tremendous job of coming off the mat because those 2 horrific losses. BYU's not as bad as Georgia State, but Georgia State's pretty good. But as far as Arkansas, I mean, people realize what a great job Houston did when he was there. I mean, it was just they were competitive. They won 3 SEC West championships, and now that's a distant measure for them. So they're so down personnel-wise right now. It's going to take a monumental, deal to get a lot of graduate transfers, JUCOs, all that. But they're way, way back in the Western Division right now.
They're as far back as you can get.
Right, exactly. But, and we'll see. Certainly they're going after some good names, I'm sure, but it's not a job that everybody just jumping on the bandwagon about right now, because they know how far you got to come back. And one thing Coach Switzer always told me and other assistants is who you got to beat in the conference you go to. I mean, where you rank in the totem pole. If you move into a league and you start out 8th in that division and, win now, it takes you 3 or 4 years. It's hard to do.
Coach, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Paul. Keep up the good work. Who's your travel agent, man?
Me.
Hey, you lead the world. You on private planes now?
Usually American Airlines.
All right, that's good. Take care of yourself.
Delta tomorrow, but
okay.
I try to spread around the Disney well. Thanks, Coach. Always great to have you on. Vince Thompson will join us in a couple of minutes.
I know Tennessee is playing really well on a 3-game win streak. They have a bye, this past week, so I'm sure they spent plenty of time on us. And Jeremy's done a really nice job from the start of the season until today on the way that his team has played, and they've gotten better each week. That's very evident when you watch early games compared to how they're playing now.
Our guys are excited to get back into game week. They should be fresh. I know I definitely am. Had a good weekend. So when you look at Missouri, a team that is 5-1 at home. They lost this past weekend. The game was really close against Florida. A couple of things didn't go their way down the stretch. Team that's really kind of dominated this series.
I think up front offensively, their offensive line's playing together. They're playing fast. They're athletic guys. They're establishing, their presence on the line of scrimmage. They're playing 3 different quarterbacks, and I'm assuming we'll see all 3. And then they've got skill on the outside. They've got good runners. And obviously, I think they've got a really good scheme on the way that they try to attack you.
Charlton hunts from his own end zone. Beauty. It sends Callaway back to his own 36. He's got 2 career punt returns for touchdowns. Make it 3. 65 yards.
One of the best punt return men. If you give him a shot at it, Callaway can hurt you.
It's an opportunity for our guys to go on the road and play a good football team that's very well coached. When you look at them, especially on the defensive side of the ball, hadn't give up hardly any points. Very good against the pass, create negative plays, have playmakers, have always had a history of having really good pass rushers. Offensively, like a lot of teams in this league, they have had to bounce around a couple of quarterbacks because of injury.
Defensively, statistically, they're solid in a lot of areas. They're athletic. Their team speed stands out when you watch them on defense. And I know that some of the problems that we've had over the last few weeks, we'll see the same thing from the other side until we have proven that we can fix it on both sides, offense and defense. That's usually the way that stuff goes. So it'll be a great challenge, a tremendous opportunity. Both teams are 5-5. Should be a great night for college football in this league. So I'm excited we're back home, and I know our kids are as well.
This is the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
We welcome you back. We're in Athens, and Coach Kirby Smart is about 35 minutes away from joining us right here. Let's head to Columbia, Missouri. Jordan Rodgers on the call tomorrow night. Tennessee comes to town with a chance to really make a statement in Missouri. Jordan, I don't know how long you've been in Columbia. Have you seen the Missouri offense anywhere?
No, still looking for him, Paul. Actually, I'm down here on the field. I figured that's where I'd find him. And, it's a no-go. Still looking for Missouri's offense.
What is going on out there?
It's interesting. When you flip on the film, you just see an offense that's not running the football well, and they're not throwing the football well. And when you dissect it even further, the biggest difference this year to last in talking to Derek Dooley and just watching the film myself is there is no down-the-field passing threat. Kelly Bryant, he's been injured, but in his last 3 games that he has played, 1 of 5 throwing the ball beyond 15 yards downfield. Now, you might say, it's a whole chicken and the egg. Do you run the football so you can throw it better? Do you throw it so you can run it better? In my opinion, being a quarterback and Derek Dooley's being a receiver, they have to stretch the field to open up lanes in the run game. Just 102 yards rushing the football the last 2 games. They got to be balanced. It starts with Kelly Bryant making better decisions and completing balls downfield so this offense can get going. Right now it's small ball, and it's not working at all.
Yeah, I want to get an assessment of Kelly Bryant because there was such an expectation, Jordan. As you look at game film, you've done their games. What has happened to him this year?
You know, it's interesting. If you look early in the season, they were playing well on the offensive side of the ball, averaging well over 35 points a game at times, and you just felt like everything was working perfectly. Kelly Bryant was using his legs, scrambling, part of the run game, but also being efficient in the pass game. You look now, really the only difference is they're not running the football quite as effectively, and really, as I mentioned, because they're not throwing it downfield effectively. But nothing's really changed with Kelly Bryant. I will say the hamstring injury, I believe, has made him a little less confident. I don't feel like he thinks he can make the same plays in and outside the pocket. So anytime you mess with a quarterback's mentality and their confidence, you're going to see that in many facets of the football game. But to me, this is the same deficiency we saw at Clemson. Clemson just had better people around him, better receivers, a better defense. He wasn't stretching the ball downfield at Clemson either. So I don't think much has changed other than maybe some confidence from the hamstring injury. But this is the same Kelly Bryant. You take his legs away from him, he's going to struggle throwing the football.
And Jordan, about 90 seconds left. Same question about Tennessee. They've been one of the great turnaround stories of the year.
Isn't it unbelievable? And just look at the beginning of the season where we thought the program might go and now winning 4 out of their last 5. I think this team has really improved by an addition by subtraction. Early in the season, a lot of guys jumping into the transfer portal. I think that was good, kind of weeding out the mentality and the characters that didn't need to be in the building. And now what you're seeing is you're seeing a more confident, a more mature Tennessee football team. But the biggest difference to me, Paul, is the quarterback position. And Jarrett Garantano has come off the bench in 5 straight games. He's making a push for 6th man of the year, and he's thrown 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's completing 67% of his passes. The biggest difference is Tennessee's not shooting themselves in the foot on offense. Garantano has brought a stability to that quarterback situation, and I like what Jeremy Pruitt has done by bringing him off the bench. I think it's checked his confidence. I think he's playing more within the system, which is helping Tennessee on offense. So they're not hurting themselves, and because of that, they're playing better.
Jordan Rodgers on the call tomorrow night as Missouri tries to turn things around and Tennessee tries to punch a bowl ticket. Jordan, thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Paul.
Great stuff from Jordan Rodgers. An intriguing game. Really, the 2 big games in the SEC are that one in Columbia, and the one here in Athens. We're going to take a break. Kirby Smart in about 30 minutes away. We'll talk to Vince Thompson. Extraordinary conversation with our next guest, who is Vince Thompson, the CEO of Melt, an Atlanta-based sports marketing firm that has really been a trailblazer in this country. And Vince, you've been at the vanguard of this naming and licensing conversation. And at the time, I think our last conversation had not been resolved. Still not sure it's resolved, but we're closer.
It's still evolving. The NCAA certainly took a little air out of the balloon, but I'm not sure there's any resolution. And certainly not any resolution with Tua's name and image and likeness as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was talking to some people the other day in New York, and the idea that had Tua had this, had we turn the clock back for the sake of argument, and 2 years ago Tua throws the walk-off second in 26 at the Mercedes Dome. What kind of money could he have made?
Well, the short answer is lots. Because you've got this quintessential kid, incredible story, incredible heart, incredible family, comes to the mainland from Hawaii, incredible sportsman. And by the way, you forget the story with him and Jalen at the time as well.
Right.
So he throws the walk-off bomb, millions. Because then he would have been on the cover of EA, NCAA the next year.
Right.
The image and likeness, and not to mention he's got one of the greatest, most marketable names of all time. But let's talk about going forward. the business impact of Tua. Does he come back to Alabama? Does he go to the NFL? Is he a reclamation project, third or fourth round? It could be 30, 40, 50, $100 million at stake.
Yeah, let's talk about that because everyone gets hung up on first-round money, which is not great.
No.
But Tua, to me, and this is where you are the expert, it seems like he could be such a marketable person. And I wonder, even more so now, if he comes back and is successful.
Oh, totally not. I mean, if you look at the amount of sympathy that he received across the nation, amazing. And you look at how he handled this, and you look at how he's handled everything, all the adversity, right. Even back to the Jalen, I would tell you that he's going to be one of the most marketable NFL players to come out probably since maybe Peyton.
Wow.
Far beyond Baker, far beyond Kyler.
So are we going to see Tua and Brad Paisley on those Nationwide commercials now?
You might. And but he fits a lot of really, really good profiles. I mean, you look at Zion, you look at LeBron. Not many solo baseball players, but. If I were his, depending on the outcome of his recovery, if I were his, running his marketing, I'd say look seriously at coming back to the University of Alabama for lots of reasons. Not to least mention the fact that, your teammates at the SEC have some new television things going on.
I've read about that.
As well. It means what it
means.
A
lot is in the media these days.
There's a lot in the media. CBS is, and their rights are in play. Right now they're paying around $50 million annually. My estimation is that'll go up to $500 million, which means, and by the way, don't forget, you and I talked about these numbers before the SEC network in the billions, and we were $2 to $5 billion. This one will probably be a 20-year, $10 billion contract in my estimation, and it may be CBS, it may be the mothership Disney, it may be Fox, and it may be an outlier like a Tim Cook or Mark Zuckerberg.
Man, now you're talking my language.
So that bodes well. Live sports is still the greatest destination for eyeballs.
So, I mean, listen, you just alluded to two companies that no one has really ever conventionally thought about in terms of Apple and Facebook, and there are many. I mean, that is where the growth is right now in sports, is it not?
It's massive. I mean, look, Amazon can pay anything they want.
Yeah.
Apple can pay anything they want. Facebook can pay anything they want. And you're forgetting, too, that also with Disney coming out with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus and these giant over-the-top streaming platforms, you're looking at reach to 2, 3, 4 billion people, not 100 million households that have cable television.
Okay.
So that's why live sports. Now, here's another thing. How much of a financial impact will the twilight of Nick Saban's career have on the value of the next SEC television deal?
I'm going to guess that somebody is saying to Nick Saban, we need you to stay.
I'd say that more than one person is saying to Nick, we need to stay. And arguably, I've run numbers that Nick is probably 30 to 40% of the value of the existing SEC broadcast agreements now. So there's a lot of incentive for a lot of us for him to say for him to stay. And obviously, I went to Auburn. It pains me sometimes to say that, but even with what's going on,
you're driven by the dollar, so we understand.
Yeah, well, yeah, my school color's green, right? So, but so it's going to be. We live in fascinating times with what's going on and how that intersects with name, image, and likeness. How that intersects with a new SEC deal. How that intersects with Tua's recovery, Saban's retirement. There is a lot of unbelievable.
I want to go back to Tua because I've made this argument against, but I must tell you I've never thought about what you're talking about. So if you had to, if I could sit you down and Tua, by the way, ride back in Tuscaloosa today. He's there to support his teammates tomorrow on Senior Day.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to sit down with him and say, Tua, this is why you should stay in school one more year, what would your most salient argument be?
Well, there's several of them. First of all, is that the recovery and the pace of the recovery is going to drive a lot of that.
Okay.
Because there is a big gap from being a first rounder to the third and fourth rounder.
Of course.
That'll drive a lot of the discussion. If the recovery is not on the pace, I would say, hey, we don't have a lot to lose by coming back. Okay. It's a great sympathy story. You know, Alabama's had a ton of injuries this year. They'll reload. Don't forget, we've got a $100 million stadium expansion going on in Alabama as well.
But Tua is still not profiting from any of that.
No, he's not, unless we're able to get, you know, some modifications in the name, image, and likeness. That's why it's really such a dynamic issue now. If you look at the intersection of all of these issues, and we're kind of picking on Alabama. Obviously, there's a lot of other big institutions, but this seems to be sort of the perfect storm and the perfect timing to create the perfect storm.
It's a lot to chew on there.
But I think it's probably, you know, it means that SEC football and it means college football is very alive and well and is probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon. If you stack our ratings up against, say, the NBA, the LSU-Alabama game had the highest number that CBS has had in 8 years. And millions and millions of viewers. And so that tells
you. It was an afternoon game still.
And it was an afternoon game. Yeah. And so
what would that game have done in prime time?
It would have done north of 20 million viewers, 20 to 25 million. And you think about, you know, the Super Bowl gets, you know, a couple hundred million.
Yeah, just for an example, the Fox game last night I think did about 13 million. That's a Monday night, Thursday night, 12 to 15 million is pretty average, right?
Right.
Now we'll say the game Sunday between the Patriots and the Cowboys will break the bank, will it not?
Oh, it'll be near. It won't be near Super Bowl, but it certainly will be near playoff and conference championship.
That's the biggest game of the year in pro football.
The biggest game of the year. The thing about the health of college football, and you and I keep coming back to this, and obviously there's legal betting now, there's fantasy, there's going to be EA is going to come back, but it's evergreen and it's passion. The interesting phenomenon now about the venues is now there's an arms race to improve the venues. Right. Look at what's here, look at what's Alabama. But when I was in Auburn last weekend, the other phenomenon is a lot of people are actually staying outside and watching the game while the game's going on in the stadium. So that's a whole nother. There were thousands of people.
I had a guy in our studio Wednesday in New York who's the head of sports for Twitter, Georgia graduate, by the way, and he was talking about all this stuff, and it was mind-blowing. And none of this would be surprising because you've been in these conversations, but I mean, people at home and in their cars just don't realize what's going on.
Truly, they don't. And like I said, we left the game a little early, and there must have been at least 10,000 people. Because the sophistication of the tailgate experience, you can get these mobile satielites, you're sitting in a comfortable chair, you're switching channels.
Now, why are people doing that?
I think it's more, you know, football now, the tailgating is the evolution of the tailgating is more of a social occasion. You go inside the stadium, maybe somebody's standing in front of you, you can't get a cold beer. I mean, those types of things. So the balance and the evolution, I had lunch today with Ross Bjork, the athletic director of Texas A&M, and you know what they've done at Kyle Field.
Oh, amazing.
I mean, but when you looked at Greg Burns' announcement, the Alabama AD, about what they were evolving the Alabama stadium, they were comparing it to Jerry's World and Mercedes-Benz. So the wake-up call is rippling through college athletic directors with the venue, and that's why I think you'll see a younger group of ADs, Alan Green, Greg Byrne, Ross Bjork, Carter at Ole Miss. They understand the nuance of the social media culture and the technology culture and the name, image, and likeness culture better, and I think you'll see a sea shift over the next few months. And college football won't look like it does in 5 years, anything like today.
Nobody better on the cutting edge of where sports is going than our guest, Vince Thompson, the president and CEO and founder of Melt. Come back soon, Vince. This is an extraordinary conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
Vince Thompson joining us. Kirby Smart is 15 minutes.
You can look right now, and I guarantee you, if Alabama weren't Alabama, they would be where I've put them. But Alabama, because they're the brand, will be in the 5th position probably until they lose to Auburn, if they lose to Auburn. I don't see Alabama moving at all. And I know you had your your data guy, your metrics guy on earlier today, and I know they've created a lot of jobs with this new college football playoff who's in thing up in Bristol. But when I start hearing this or that team has this low a percentage of chance of getting in or this high a percentage chance of getting in, Paul, from my vantage point, that just allows for the committee to continue to play the brand game, and it also allows much of the media to say, why should I care about Utah and Oregon? They have a 0.87% chance of getting in if they win out. Therefore, I don't have to care. It promotes laziness in the media. That's what it does. Albeit with a different set of circumstances and an offense and a quarterback like LSU's now that could probably be in a better position. But again, the rest of the country is going to go, really? We got to see that again? We got to see Alabama and LSU again? Oh, by the way, I believe at that time, Paul, Bill Hancock wouldn't even let us use the word playoff until that game happened. Then all of a sudden his office became named the playoff office. So that's what we're looking at, and that's why the branding matters and pure playoff privilege and all of that. The loss of Tua Tagovailoa, a lot of people were suggesting automatically. I mean, as soon as the game was over, oh, they're done. That's it. What? Huh? Are you kidding me? No way. This only enhances the Alabama narrative if they can go and boat race Auburn at Auburn, puts them in a great position. And if LSU does what it's supposed to do and beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, Alabama, in my opinion, will be in. They will absolutely be in. And the rest of the country, too bad. Here we go again. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State would be your other team, another one of the playoff privileged, who, by the way, got in without having to win its Big Ten championship one year, much to the chagrin of Penn State. So they fall into that category as well. Brand names, Paul, all about branding, and Alabama is the poster child for the pure playoff privilege, no doubt about it. Georgia's one of them, too. Georgia lost to a third-string quarterback at home, and it didn't matter.
Welcome back to the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
We are back. Kirby Smart is coming up here in just a few minutes. But this isn't a warm-up act. This is Laura Rutledge joining us.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a warm-up act. But basically, they were like, you know what, we got to fill a little bit of time till the main act gets here. I'm like, the Jonas Brothers opening for James Taylor. That was for you.
I had to do that once. It was some corporate event, and they had like a really big speaker, and they asked me to come at 7 o'clock, and it was a happy hour. And I mean, I literally was like talking, and not one person was listening.
The people are having their own conversations, and you're just
I just started mumbling.
Anything. Well, exactly.
Which I normally do anyway.
It wasn't really a departure from the usual for you, but that's here's the thing. I'm going to try to say the most outlandish things that I can to see if I can somehow upstage Kirby Smart.
I'm listening.
I can't think of any, so moving along. Paul, do you think the weather is really going to be as bad tomorrow as people are talking about?
Well,
I hate to make this about the weather, but
the forecast is pretty grim.
Yeah, I think that factors into the game more than people are talking about.
Here, I will tell you, there are some nervous dogs around here.
Really?
Yeah, there's just something about this. This is a game that just seemed. I mean, we've seen this game on the schedule, Laura, for more than a year, and you say, wow, that could be a really interesting game. Yeah. And then it just kind of popped up because Georgia's had Florida, then at Auburn. Mm-hmm. And those are their two traditional rivals. And then they've had Notre Dame. And this game just like shows up, and you're like going, okay, do we know anything about Texas? We don't play Texas A&M.
Do you think it's more about A&M and Jimbo, or more about maybe Georgia fans feeling like their offense hasn't fully clicked on all cylinders yet? Their defense has been great, right? So you think it's more A&M Jimbo?
Well, I mean, listen,
waiting in the wings.
On this program, fans have already turned the page to the playoffs in Georgia and LSU in 2 weeks. And this is just
it's a sneaky one.
And all of a sudden, like A&M, okay, go to Athens, and then go to LSU.
Yeah. See how that goes for you. Right. Yeah, look, I mean, I really do think next year A&M is going to be a team that we're talking about at the very end, whether that's related to the SEC championship or at least being in the mix, maybe in the mix for the playoff. Who knows? Their schedule's manageable. What I would say about this game is I think this could be Georgia's opportunity to really have that dominant win that a lot of people seem to be waiting for. And I'm not saying that because, beating an A&M team right now would be a hugely dominant win.
Was this one of the things you were going to say to see if we were paying attention?
Exactly. You caught me. But truly, this is a chance for them to say, look, A&M's got some talent. Let's put all the doubters aside and say, no, here we are. We're ready for the SEC championship. We're taking this seriously, and boom, boom, boom.
And then they have Georgia Tech next week.
Well, that was you saying an outlandish thing. Because Georgia Tech, listen, I feel bad because my dad is a Georgia Tech fan.
Right. And a heck of an engineer.
Yes, he is. Ramblin' wreck. I do think that Georgia Tech has the right guy. Jeff Collins is the right hire. Not to get off track here and talk about Georgia Tech, but this is not going to be the year that they beat Georgia.
No.
So Georgia, this is a chance tomorrow, in my mind, to say, look, let's put on a little bit of a beauty pageant for the committee and let that be fresh in their minds.
My argument, well, not argument, my response. Too many other people I'm arguing with right now.
Yeah, keep it clean here.
Would simply be Georgia doesn't have to put any airs on. All Georgia has to do is win out.
You're right. Why does it feel like, though, that maybe they do? It just seems maybe here's...
You're listening to those Pac-12 people too much.
I think that's right. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, and this is not what the committee necessarily does, but it's got to be in their heads, especially with some coaches on this committee. If you matched up, let's say, it's probably not going to be Georgia and Oregon that we're talking about battling it out for a spot, because at that point Georgia would have beat LSU if they're in the mix for this, and it wouldn't matter. But if you look at Georgia, they would beat the Pac-12 champion.
I think so.
Whether it's Oregon or Utah.
The interesting thing about Georgia is that before the season started, I had some of our colleagues whisper to me, I think they're better than Alabama.
Georgia, yeah.
And that was like is this the year for Georgia? And then they beat Notre Dame, and then they just didn't look very good after that, and they faded away pretty quickly with that embarrassing loss to South Carolina. And ever since then, it's been a struggle. They've won huge games.
That's the thing. I don't think we're giving them enough credit. No. To go on the road and beat Auburn, and look, they could have beat Auburn by a lot more. Yeah. They missed some opportunities there. To go on the road and do that, Auburn's a team that I think anybody who watches football would agree, and watches it with an intelligent eye, would agree that Auburn is deserving of maybe a higher ranking. They've just had a tough schedule, and they've lost some of these games based on a lack of offensive power. But either way, Georgia had that as a huge win. It's weird. It's like we're not giving them enough credit.
They remind me of some Alabama teams in the early Nick Saban era where, they really were not. They didn't look great, but they won national championships just with great defense.
Yeah. So, look, I'm with you, and I think I know where you might be going with that. If Georgia ends up in the playoff, they very well could be the national champion.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think, and I don't know that enough people are talking about that.
They're only, let's see, only 5 straight wins away from it all.
Yeah, whatever. It's no big deal. I do think they could. Look, I think LSU is an incredibly talented team. I think they're deserving of the number 1 spot. I think Georgia could beat them in the SEC championship.
Oh, I don't have any doubt. LSU, quite frankly, does the unthinkable, and they finally beat Alabama, and since then we are picking them apart.
I know.
Their defense is no good.
Now everyone's like, oh, man, they're not a complete team. Ohio State's – yeah. If LSU, even if they lose the SEC championship, they're still in. There's no way the committee.
Well, again, we were thinking I don't know where I was earlier.
Who knows?
Don't know where I am right now.
Where are you?
But all these. Texas A&M moves through. Georgia beats LSU. They could literally just blow this whole thing up.
I know. At that point, you say, "There's Alabama."
Yeah.
Sort of waiting there. Alabama would need that type of chaos. Maybe not, but I think they do.
Alabama needs chaos in the Pac-12.
Yes, which could happen.
Yeah.
Look, who knows? Maybe Herm Edwards and Arizona State, do they beat Oregon? I don't know.
Yeah, why not?
I'm not predicting it, but it is funny. I said I'd say all these crazy things, and I haven't said one crazy thing yet. I do think, though, that Alabama should not be counted out. I'm really interested to see even what they look like tomorrow with Mac Jones.
Yeah, listen, Alabama fans, and you're married to one, will jump on anything. I mean, Mac Jones is 17 out of 19 tomorrow. He'll be an early candidate for the 2020 Heisman.
Right. That's true. And look, he could be. I mean, he's a smart player. He's very accurate for the most part, in very small sample size that we've seen. But, yeah, here it really is interesting. It's like A&M has a chance here to be a big factor, and Auburn has been and will be, too.
Yeah, Auburn was that team.
Yeah.
They had everyone on the schedule, and then they exit stage. Is it right or left?
I would say this would be stage left.
Okay, you're a former
But you know what's
performer.
funny? Yeah, when I was dancing and doing all those things, I never knew what stage right or stage left was myself. So oftentimes they'd say that, and I'd go to the wrong.
For those of us less theatrically inclined, what is the difference?
Well, so I think it's the way that you're looking at the stage, or the way it's not the way you're looking. It's the way that you are facing outward toward the audience.
Yeah, so I'm facing the stage right now. Stage right. So I would probably go off stage
that
right.
Way. Yeah. I think, but you know what? Someone's probably going to tweet me and say you actually had that backwards. But either way, what I would do is they would say you're exiting stage right, and so I would think I would go toward the right, and then everyone would go the other way, and I'd just have to turn around and follow them.
What's the biggest stage you've ever been on?
I actually performed at New York City Center.
Did you really?
When I was a senior in high school with the Orlando Ballet, and that was the biggest stage. It was the American Ballet Theater was there. It was for a Youth America Grand Prix Gala, and I was in the back, but I was there, and I didn't fall down.
You want to know about mine?
What?
You want to know what stage?
Yes.
Biggest stage I've ever been on. I was in children's theater in Rumpelstiltskin, and I played a tree. I kid you not.
Wait, what?
I'll never forget it.
What? Okay, what was required out of being a tree?
I mean, you basically just stand there.
Did you have a line?
No.
Well, why didn't you get a better part?
I got a better part later. I did one play as an adult.
And what were you in that?
We don't have time. But you've heard me tell this story.
Well, I wanted you to tell it again.
I was in a community theater about 25 years ago, and I thought I was so good.
You were so good.
I literally believed by the final night, I would be called to Hollywood. I was so either Broadway or Hollywood. I never got a single call.
Well, they really missed it. They missed their chance. What under the sun? Here's the thing. He did get a call from Hollywood about being that tree, though.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Broadway has never been the same since. Thank you, Laura.
Rumpelstiltskin, I love him. Isn't that so funny? He just slept for all those years and then came back. Is that the story? I can't remember. Anyway, we'll ask Kirby Smart that.
Kirby Smart joining us next.
Okay.
I spoke to a group of Georgia grads at Terry College of Business this summer, and somebody asked me what's the scariest game on Georgia's schedule. Now this is in June. I said it's Texas A&M because it falls right after Auburn, and you know that Auburn is going to be even if you win, you're going to get beat up. And now not only did Georgia win against Auburn, they clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, won the East again, and now they've got to get back up to play a team that's playing their best football of the season. It will be fascinating to see the beginning of that game and what the energy level is for Georgia.
And as you look at Georgia right now, I mean, the offense has really trailed off. Now let's be honest. In the last 4 games, they played 2 of the better defenses in America.
Right.
That may be more of the reason than anything. And one game was a downpour. So I mean, you keep seeing those stats thrown around, but are they really accurate in terms of a true read?
Well, I wouldn't wade too much into it. Now, there's no question that Georgia, because of their youth at wide receiver, and if they don't have the other kid in there, the transfer from Miami, if they don't have him and Lawrence Cager, if they don't have him in there, they're a different kind of offense because the other receivers are talented but very, very young. I mean, they've been able to win that way because they've got a very good offensive line, and DeAndre Swift's a great running back, and Jake Fromm is a wonderful manager of the game. And I mean that is a very, very high compliment. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't expect them to score more than 21 or 24 points last week. I think they'll do better against Texas A&M, but that's just who Georgia is, Paul. they're not gonna average 35, 40 points a game. They're gonna beat you running the ball and beat you with that defense, which is one of the better ones we've seen at Georgia in a while.
Tony, what happens, and somebody just asked me this, Mark Kubiak, what happens if Georgia loses this game and then beats LSU, and that's assuming LSU shows up undefeated?
It'll be a sleepless night for the fans who follow Georgia, because if they beat LSU and LSU's 12-1, I think LSU's getting in.
Yeah.
Because look at that body of work that LSU has, and Georgia sitting there, they would be 11-2, and they would be SEC champions. Are you guaranteed to get in at 11-2? Well, they've never put a 2-loss team in before. Would Georgia be deserving? Yes, because they're the SEC champions. But as the way this thing is set up, there's a bunch of teams. There's a bunch of one-loss teams right now who feel like they deserve in. I just think it would be a very sleepless night for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Welcome back, and it's always great to be in Athens, and it's especially great to welcome our next guest, the head football coach of the University of Georgia, Kirby Smart, on the day before the Texas A&M game. And I was just joking with Coach afterwards, what did you do to upset the SEC schedulers to have this game at a time when everyone else is taking it easy?
I guess we had our easy earlier. So I told our players today that everybody's got to grind in the SEC, and everybody's is kind of at different times. Ours is now. Yeah, and listen, you're right. I mean, you're going to play the same number of conference games, but this has always been that weekend. I think we were here last year. I think it was UMass. I can't remember. Yeah. But in trying to get ready for this game, you just came off of, I mean, by all accounts, a brutal game that we all watched, and it's kind of hard to find a more physical, draining game than going to Jordan-Hare Stadium. Yeah, it was a tough, emotional, physical game, but I'm going to be honest with you, Paul. They all are. I mean, when you look at Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, the last week's game, they're challenging and they're tough. I know you have a great wife, and I'm not going to make a big deal about it. You addressed it Monday, but you were emotional after the game, like a lot of coaches are. I'm not sure how to approach this next question, but you apologize for it, but I mean, that's what coaches do, is it not? Well, that's what some coaches do, and that's not what I want to represent. Okay. So, I mean, not that I'm perfect. I'm by far from that, and it's one of the things I know I always want to work on is my language, and it's not something I want to represent. But I was very emotional, and I was excited, and I do think that our kids on our team understand that. And listen, I've heard you in the locker room before, and that's the locker room is a sacred place. Yeah. I've also been around you outside of the locker room. I've never heard you talk like that. So that's not really indicative. When were you in the locker room? Was that when you were coaching that time? Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So I was asked to be the head coach at the spring game, which sounds like a big deal. It really doesn't mean anything. I remember this. And I'm in the locker room, and Kirby is talking to the coach. Kirby's talking to the team. And I'm like, my jaw is dropping. I mean, they had just come off of a national championship, and they were dogging it in the spring game. It was a spring game. And you just went ballistic. And I heard a guy behind me whisper, he said, I promise you, he didn't learn that blank from me. And I turned around, and it was Nick Saban. We get excited for our spring games in the SEC. We have coaches like you come in. I think next time we're going to let you call the plays and call the defenses too. My team won. You had good players. I mean, I've got a better record than some coaches in Alabama. One never made it to the first game. But I'm really interested, though, because there's nothing you can do, but I mean, is the video got? I mean, was it the video that got out? Was that how it happened? Oh no, this was said after the. Okay. This was in the press conference. Oh, you were in the press conference. They asked me what I said to the players, and I was a little too honest. So. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to take back my my defense of you here. Right. Let's talk serious football for a second, Coach, because we were listening to something before we came on here, and there's always conversation about your offense, and I know you're sitting here number 4 in the country. You're 9-1, and that's what fans want. They want to be in contention at this time of the year. But talk about the offense, and certainly it has been challenged lately in big games, but you still won the games. Yeah, first off, I don't think you have to defend your offense in this conference when you're playing the level of football that we're capable of playing. And there's good defenses. I mean, the SEC is a very defensive league. When you look across the board, and I turn on tape and I get to watch it every week, there's some good defenses out there. There's some really good defensive backs, and they tend to get their hands all over you. And they let them play in our league. And that's what you look across the board and see. So we've had moments where we've really shined in third down. We've had moments we've really shined in the red area. We've had moments that we've been able to run it better than others. We haven't put that combination together. And that's what we're always looking to do. So we're trying to improve. We've had some receivers that have been out of action, in action, out of action. We've had an offensive line that's been in and out and been a little beat up. But we're trying to put a complete game together.
And in terms of what you see from A&M, I mean, much will be made tomorrow on the broadcast about you and Jimbo. Certainly you've got a lot of roots together. Similar trees, but different sides of the ball, to say the least. I've known Jimbo for a long time. He was coaching when I played, so he knows me as a player.
Old, right? So he's showing I'm not going to say he's old. He's just older. He's very experienced, but I've had a lot of respect for Jimbo. I learned a lot of ball from Jimbo the years that we were together at LSU, and he does an unbelievable job offensively. You see it in the way he still brings old school ball with 2-back sets, and he still opens things up, and he really coaches the quarterback well. What he's done with Kellen Mond from beginning to now is incredible.
Yeah, and there's he is. This is now toward the end of his second year, and he's always been a great coach. This one is when you would think he would be the most dangerous. He's got all these games under his belt. When you would go against him in practice, I mean, obviously there's a lot of spirit that goes into that. Does that carry over after practice?
Not usually, not after practice, but he's a fiery guy. You know, the year I was there at LSU, I was the secondary coach, and he and Will got to go head-to-head a lot, and those were a lot more fiery than I was a part of. By that time, I had left, and Jimbo stayed and went on his way, ended up at FSU. But he's always been a very good, open-minded offensive coach that does a lot of things. I mean, he really makes you defend every part of the field.
I'm sure you've heard by now, because coaches have to keep up with the weather. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. You have great experience at that from a few. First of all, I don't know how you ever dry it off from the Kentucky game. But how does that change as you meet with the team later? And I mean, you've been planning all week, but it's here. The rain is coming.
Yeah, it's coming. It's not something that you control. So you take things out of your control. You plan. You try to prepare your team for that. We've had that news for really 3 or 4 days now. We've worked on several things to try to help with that. And a lot of times that equalizes games. It makes things, probably a little lower scoring. It makes it sometimes a one-possession game. So you got to be smart. You got to be careful in kicking situations. You got to be able to handle that, and those are all critical times. The good news is we did get to go through that in Kentucky, and it was probably a tougher environment in that it was much colder.
Yeah, I mean, you work all year. I mean, I don't know if you try to prepare for everything. You've already done that, but psychologically, does it help if there is such a thing, having spent 4 hours in a driving cold rain a month ago?
I don't know that. I don't know if that experience is going to help or not. I do know psychologically I'm comfortable to say that our kids have had to handle that ball, play in it, and exchange the ball. And defensively, we had to play in it. So, both teams will be in the same elements. Hopefully the field will be in good conditions. Who knows?
One last thing. Fans talk about what's ahead, and we all know you're heading to the SEC championship game. And I doubt seriously coaches or players think about that. But how do you just keep? I know it's a grind every week, and you're as good as I've ever heard, no matter who the opponent. But is that it's just another week? You worry about what's in front of you Saturday, and not what's 2 weeks or 8 weeks ahead?
Yeah, you can't really think about it. When you have a team the caliber of Texas A&M and you turn on their tape, it's so clear, and they have such good players at every position that you're consumed with the game plan. You're not thinking about what's down the road. You can't control that, and all we're thinking about is the next step. We're going 10 feet in front of us. The next step is the most important thing.
Well, you certainly won't deviate, because I've never heard you talk about anything else, no matter who the opponent was. So
that's the way it should be.
Well, I'm glad. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm still feel guilty. I kept you 5 minutes late in an interview a few weeks ago, so I'm getting you out of here. I don't want to get blamed anymore for making Coach Kirby Smart late. Coach, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul.
Always enjoy seeing you. We'll take a break. We're live in Athens. Coach Kirby Smart joining us just hours before the big game tomorrow.
I think it'd be very difficult for Auburn's offense, as great as their defense is, to match Tua and Alabama's offense. Mac Jones is a good quarterback, you know that, but this is not Arkansas. We are a 41-point favorite. This is his first game on the road as a starter, from what I remember, and this is a heck of a hostile environment, as they say, to play in. Probably one of the toughest in the conference.
Danny, I want to ask you about Auburn because you came on here before the season and were unusually upbeat about Gus Malzahn's team. A lot of people were surprised, especially with the difficulty of Auburn's schedule. They're sitting there right now with 3 losses. If they beat Alabama, they'll finish 9-3. Pretty much where you had them.
Yeah, I said I thought they'd win 9 or 10 games. On your show the last 5 years, I think when everybody's been pretty high on them, I've said they'd lose at least 3 or 4 games, and they have. And I've also said this on your show, and I still believe it. Malzahn, I think he has a good year every 6 years. This was his 6th year. And this is the best preseason team I've seen him have in 6 years.
You've heard all the criticism. I mean, I'm on all these shows, and everybody wants to say Alabama hasn't played anyone. Their defense isn't elite. But, I'm not trying to use the Vegas line as anything other than what it is, and we all know what it is, but there's still this perception out there that Alabama is a really good football team.
They're better than a really good football team. They're one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country, and you have an interesting situation, as you know. If Alabama should beat Auburn, what happens if Georgia loses to LSU? I know what I would do. And if you're trying to pick the best 4 teams in the country, I would put Alabama in there. I can't think. Oregon's certainly a good team. Utah's a good team. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, they'd crush Oregon or Utah. It'd be like a 2-touchdown favorite, I would think. And maybe not 2 touchdowns. I know Clemson would be. Ohio State would be. LSU probably would be too. They'd be a substantial favorite over those 2 teams. So give me another team. Oklahoma, not that they wouldn't have a chance, but they're probably better than Oregon and Utah, but they're not in the same breath, or they shouldn't be, as Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, and Georgia.
This is the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
Welcome back. It's been a great day here in Georgia. Kirby Smart spending some time with us before the big game tomorrow. Mike Griffith will join us next. Have a good opportunity to visit with him. Let's get back to the calls. And Harold is calling next. Good afternoon, Harold. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Nothing against Sweet Home Alabama, but I actually prefer Poncho and Lefty. But
that's a good song.
Yeah. I love hearing Kirby Smart. If you look forward, you're looking at my office, although I live about 3 blocks up the hill. But if you look behind, I have a research proposal to you, Paul.
Okay.
The building behind you is called the I don't know. It's some research library, but they ask for scholars and residents, and what I want you to do is send me your resume, because I want you to be the next scholar and resident. The fellow that was talking to you earlier, I think we could put together a research proposal, Paul, about stadium evolution, the size of the stadiums. Because I know personally in Athens, oh my God, the way the stadium has evolved, and we all blame it on Herschel. But
by the way, I would love to accept your opportunity to be a scholar in residence. I've been considering academia for some time, and this might be my.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And then what the setup would be, Paul, is I also get asked to do freshman seminars. So you and I could do a freshman seminar, and God, I've already written it down, and my mom complains about my handwriting, but it was
better than
what
mine.
What you and I would talk about is irrational fans. Yeah.
That would be. Listen, I'm in. I can start. I I can start Monday.
Well, no. You got to go through your fall stuff.
Okay.
But I was thinking, this is usually it's a couple of years in advance, Paul.
Okay.
It's kind of like those.
Well, let's
talk
about it.
If you and I could do this freshman seminar, but the one thing I want to do, I think I've told you, and I have my friend Neil Williamson. You probably know him from Hondo. He and I have been looking at the railroad tracks, and I've been thinking about doing a whole thing where I'm going to go back through and figure out. And you probably don't know it, but we used to spend the night on the tracks, and when we beat Bear Bryant, I told you 21-0. But you and I could get together. We could do the freshman seminar. You could Okay, now, again, I would have to give you a little bit of money because I'm sure the university ain't going to give you none. But.
No, Harold, if I got into academia, it would be out of the love of helping young people. It wouldn't be for the money.
Well, that's what we all say, but, yeah, you never know.
Well, no, I do know. I mean, I'm really I'm interested in doing something
Paul,
worthwhile.
Can I tell you one thing that came to my mind? I was on my bike ride up in Helen, Georgia today.
Okay.
And I heard that you guys are going to give a prize for like some best poster. Yeah,
on SEC Nation.
Yeah. So I'm not an artist, and I had all those things about Marcus Spears, and because I hate Florida, I was not going to say anything about Tim Tebow, and then your other buddy Marty Party. But here's my poster. If I could have made it, it is Paul is fine, but Laura is the bomb.
Wow, that's incredible, Harold. We got a deal, Harold. Call my people, and they'll call you back. We got to come to Athens twice.
Yeah.
A lot going on here. Mike Griffith, it's an important moment when Mike joins us. Mike, it's always good to see you, and I'm going to make a vow to behave because every time we have a conversation, I get emotional, and the Mike Griffith fan club just comes after me.
Yeah,
I can't handle that anymore.
Can't escape them, right?
Besides, I think I've joined you on some of the conspiracy theories out there, so I don't have to admonish you for that. Let's start with what's going on right here. Kirby Smart was just here. He's always locked in. But he really needs to be locked in this week, and you, based on what I've read from you, he is.
Yeah, this is just the way Kirby Smart is. I mean, this isn't an act. This isn't what he's like on the set. This is what he's like in real life.
Right.
I mean, he's 43 years old, and you think he's on his last year of life having to win a championship. He has a very deliberate style. I mean, Kirby's the guy that said going into this year that 24-6 isn't good enough.
Right.
I mean, I don't know many head coaches that would put themselves out there like that, but Kirby Smart understands that his fans want a national championship. That's what he was hired to deliver.
Right.
And he's got a real sense of urgency, Paul. And the way the schedule has shaken out, with 5 of the previous 6 teams having a bye week before they play Georgia, I mean, it's one team's best punch after another. And even though Texas A&M had a game last week, I think they're going to get the Aggies' best shot. I mean, they absolutely dominated that South Carolina team that won here in October, over 300 yards rushing on a Will Muschamp defense.
That's a really good point. And I know, I joked with him about the schedule, but listen, the SEC schedule, no matter where it falls, is still the same schedule, except it just seems more difficult for Georgia. I sound like Mike Griffith now.
Well, I mean, if you want to play Notre Dame or if you want to play Western Carolina, I mean, that's a choice, right?
Right.
So, I mean, Georgia has gone out of their way to schedule aggressively. And in the future schedules, in this make-believe world of 2024 and 2026, I mean, probably be an 8-team playoff by then, Paul, I would think.
So.
But Georgia has tried to be aggressive with their schedule. They do play another Power 5 opponent, although there hasn't been much power where Georgia Tech has been concerned. Technically, they count. Maybe this year they'll give a little bit more of a game. I don't know. I know they had a nice win last night. But Georgia has, for the most part, played 2 Power 5 teams every year.
So true, and it will help them, or it has helped them from a schedule, from a rating standpoint, because certainly that Notre Dame game really gave Georgia a boost early on.
It did, and it was another game they had to survive. I mean, you talk about a game of survival. We saw that game down at Florida, Jacksonville.
Right.
It took it took a Tennessee transfer to make that catch on a 3rd and 7. I mean, we all thought Kirby was going to run it and punt it, but in that moment, he went aggressive, and it'll be really interesting to see what Georgia decides to do tomorrow against A&M. I mean, Jimbo Fisher, a pretty wily coach. These teams mirror one another somewhat. Quarterbacks are a little different, but if you look at the style, they're quite similar, and how aggressive will Georgia feel like they need to be against this Jimbo Fisher team?
Yeah, I mean, Jimbo Fisher is that guy that when he came in 2 years ago, Mike, everyone was talking about him, and he kind of went to the back of the room and took his seat. But he could wreak some havoc these last
He's the guy, you know what, he's the fish you put in the tank and you worry about him eating everybody else.
Yeah.
You talk about a shark tank in the SEC, and Jimbo is a very good coach. He's experienced. He's been around the block a few times. And obviously, he's got a $75 million guaranteed contract. He knows how to negotiate.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money and a lot of pressure in college. They're expecting a national championship,
too. And he has yet to have that breakthrough win.
Yeah, not this year. None of their wins. I mean, we've talked about, well, they lost to this team. They lost to this team. Who did they beat? Lamar, Texas State, South Carolina. Is that their best win? They haven't beat a team with a winning record this season.
His signature win in 2 years is losing by 2 to Clemson his first year.
Right. Yeah, and they're getting restless. And now he's got an experienced quarterback, which is something Georgia hasn't seen. And, right. Ian Book, Notre Dame, but as far as SEC quarterbacks, he had a lot of first-time, a lot of rookie guys out there. Bo Nix, by the way, isn't he going to be special? But still, this is the first real experienced quarterback Georgia has faced in the SEC. So I expect there to be some challenges.
So what's the deal? I'm going to ask you this like a fan. What's the deal with Georgia's offense? We know the numbers. It has been a struggle the last 4 or 5 weeks. 2 very good defenses thrown in there.
Sure.
Maybe 2.5.
Complementary football. It reminds me, you remember Gene Stallings. You remember how, Gene, we'd watch these games and it would be 21-10. It might as well have been 100. When you've got a defense as good as Georgia, you don't really need to take a lot of chances on offense when you're guarding that lead. You can kind of run the clock, play field position football, make sure the offense has got a long field. Don't give them a short field. No turnovers, right? And Georgia hasn't had any turnovers since that South Carolina game. They haven't trailed since that South Carolina game. So as long as you're playing ahead, you got a quarterback that takes good care of the football. Don't take unnecessary chances. Don't beat yourself. Paul, I know you're not a NASCAR fan, but for the NASCAR fans,
Jimmy Johnson's retired.
It's like Talladega. It's 188 laps, man, and to win the race, you got to be there on the last lap. And that's what Georgia's done with this offense. Conservative, protect your quarterback from injury. Don't take unnecessary chances.
You disappoint me.
What?
Because I covered a lot of NASCAR.
Yeah.
And I have. I've covered the Daytona 500. I've been to a bunch of these early in my career. And Jimmy Johnson's won 7 championships.
He has, and Kirby's that crew chief that's conserving the mileage.
Kirby is the crew chief,
laying in the back of the pack. They're conserving them out. They want to be there when the race finishes. And if they beat Texas A&M and Georgia Tech, they'll be right there playing LSU.
So when they come in for that final pit, they're not taking 4 fresh.
Well, it depends on what the other cars do.
Okay.
See, this is how Kirby manages each game. If he's pushed like he was at Florida, he'll make those aggressive decisions. When Georgia gets – look at Alabama game last year in the SEC Championship. When Georgia gets pushed, they'll let it out. But you got to push them to take them out of their comfort zone of running, punting, playing defense, sound football.
I know one thing. When you don't win the race in NASCAR, you just say, just one of them deals.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be one of those. I don't think it'd be one of those deals this year. Oh, I did a ton of NASCAR.
Did you really?
Tons of 15 years of it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That was the off season back in the day. That's what you did when you weren't doing football.
It is amazing. In Alabama, when I first got there, NASCAR was like the second most important thing.
Yeah.
Now
it's Auburn.
That's true. Mike Griffith is our guest. We're going to take a break. We're going to hold Mike over because there's a lot more to discuss. And if you thought this was a quiet segment, stick around.
Okay.
Get your popcorn, and let's start lighting some fireworks. Mike Griffith joins us when we come back.
What you try to emphasize is the facts. Here are the facts. If we block and tackle people, we're pretty good. You know what I mean? We block and tackle people. If we do simple better, we're pretty good. If we don't, and we turn the ball over and we don't play well on special teams, or we give up big explosive plays, we're not very good.
We want to affect the outcome of our own program and how we play and what we do and what we get out of that. I mean, we want to affect our program by how we play, and hopefully we've learned from the games earlier in the year of how to approach those games and understand the level of ball you have to play at.
If you get their focus on playing better and getting better, especially the second part of your roster, because we got twos that are having to play now. And so now this week, more twos are going to play. The next week, maybe more twos are going to play because you got more guys getting injured. So how do I get the rest of my roster better is really all we focus on.
It's going to be nothing but a great learning experience here, but something hopefully we've learned, and we've played well this last month, and we keep November rolling and play well good football. But it's important for our program. I mean, not just to play playoffs is wonderful, but I'm worried about what's going on at A&M.
Welcome back to the Paul Finebaum Show, presented by Johnsonville.
We're back here in the final hour of the program, and Mike Griffith joining us. Mike, we spent a lot of time talking to you about the college football playoff. And Georgia, to me, it seems like they're either going to win out and get in, or they're probably not going to get in. I don't think there's too much mystery, but there is still a great deal of debate about what goes on every Tuesday night and what we're going to see here in 2.5 weeks.
Well, I mean, this is what they wanted, right? They wanted to create a system that was so gummed up and cloaked with no accountability and no transparency. They want to make it a guessing game. They want to turn it into a circus. They want to put pressure on the teams to feel like that they have to run a 2-minute offense when they're up by 4 touchdowns in the second quarter. Right. This is part of the game. This is where we're at. We're running up the score and putting up offensive numbers counts. Remember in the BCS, Paul, when they had the computer ranking and there was a point of diminishing return with the margin of victory, I think, in the Jeff Sagarin. That doesn't apply here. This committee's going, well, this team ranks here on offense, and here's what Oklahoma scored last year, and, they give up more than 30. Yeah, but we don't want to hear that. And here's what they score, and here's their quarterback who just won the Heisman, and, boy, wouldn't that be a good TV matchup? So let's go ahead and put Oklahoma in ahead of Alabama, even though Georgia and Alabama just played a classic, and Georgia would give a much better game. So it's about matchups. And it's very vague, and it's very fluid. And what applies this week to the rankings doesn't necessarily apply last week. There's no precedent here. It's not like a court of law.
Well, and they want to tell you that we just tear it up and start over again, which I'm not sure is a good way of doing it.
I don't know what the perfect way is, but I remember there was a guy, one of the computer formulas that the BCS used. The man's name was David Rothman, and he was literally a rocket expert. And he explained to me that the more metrics that you use to try and find the true mean or the true center of something, the more accurate that would be. And with all due respect to these 13 committee members, I do think there's a degree of groupthink. And just like there would be on a jury, I think there's probably people that are more persuasive than others. And that's where the credibility comes in, because you have sitting athletic directors who could be viewed of having a vested interest.
Now, listen, I know you did a deep dive into what happened last year because Georgia was the 5th team, and a lot of people agreed with you that they should have been in. But I know we've talked about it, and I'm going to just sit back and listen because we've turned this into a bit of a. I've turned this into a bit of a circus, but I'm no longer thinking this is circus-like because of some other things that I've watched and witnessed. But your theory on what happened last year was what?
Well, I mean, my theory on what happened was that Oklahoma was a more attractive playoff team rather than a rematch.
Because of the quarterback.
But the way that they got to the decision, they referred to the protocol. Well, we couldn't make a decision on who the best 4th team was, so we reverted back to our protocol, which was that Oklahoma had won the Big 12 championship.
Right. Okay.
Now, the year before, winning the league championship didn't matter so much, and Alabama got in at large. But in this particular case...
And then Ohio State got one, too.
So in this particular case, though, winning a league championship did matter. And when I talked with Roy Kramer about this last summer, and he's just a brilliant man, just truly a legend of college football, probably the most powerful administrator of our lifetime, Paul. You know, the BCS was created in a way to take the regionalism and the bias out of it. There's no way that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 would have signed up for the BCS had they had the current format, in my opinion. They wanted to make sure they got a fair shot. So give us a fair shot, give us a formula, tell us what the rules are before we sit at the card table. Let's know what game we're playing here. Let's know what's Trump. Let's not have Kirby Smart was the one that said it. It's a moving target. His quote was, it's going to change every year. And Kirby's absolutely right. Now, some people will tell you, well, that's the beauty of it. We're talking about it. We're debating it. Well, okay, maybe it's fun and maybe it drives ratings or whatever. But is it fun right now for Alabama?
No.
Because they lost a quarterback? Because they knew they had to beat Mississippi State in impressive fashion in case it comes down to Alabama and Oregon and you have 2 one-loss teams. And it's going to be who wins the beauty contest. So that's why Alabama's running a 2-minute. Don't blame Nick Saban. Okay, he didn't make these rules. He's just playing the game. And the game is you have to win impressively to impress this committee. And they're not going to tell you what's important. They're not going to tell you what part of it's the most. They'll reserve the right to tell you after the process why they picked a team over you.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, they're up 35-7. I had similar thoughts at the time that he didn't know that was enough.
No, you don't know. And it's not enough to win the game. We're not talking about winning the game.
No, the game was not the issue.
No.
It was 13 people in Grapevine, Texas.
But there's another issue here that I'm seeing. And again, I cover Kirby Smart daily. People say, oh, you talk a lot about Kirby. Yeah, no kidding. I go to every press conference. I listen to what he says. He's 43 years old. He's way ahead of the curve. He's a smart guy. You know, even though he doesn't say much on set, he's a thing. He told us at the second week of the season, more quarterbacks are going down. This is a byproduct of the offenses that teams are running. And so when you hear people, oh, I wish Georgia had an offense like that. You know, they're not running up all these. When your quarterback runs around, buys times, and I don't blame Tua. Tua is a hero. Tua is a warrior. He's a wonderful young man. He's doing what he does.
Right.
But when you play that style, eventually you're going down. Tim Tebow, the most indestructible-looking college football. You couldn't create Tim Tebow on a video game, as big and as strong and as indestructible as he looked. Tim Tebow went down. If you don't protect your quarterback, which Georgia does, this is a game of poker. Like I said, you got to get to the last lap. And Georgia's done a great job protecting Jake Fromm, not just with a great offensive line, but with their play calls and all those boring runs up the middle that stop teams from blitzing and neutralize the pass rush.
So there is a method to the madness.
No doubt. That's why Kirby's gone with this style. I mean, he has recruited this team, as I said before. He's the CEO, he is the GM that has essentially drafted this team from his recruiting and built it in this mold. To do what they're doing. Now, is their offensive line healthy enough to get to the finish line? Is their receiving core, can their go-to receiver get healthy? These are important components if they're going to beat LSU. But to this point, Georgia's formula has worked, even though it's not the prettiest thing sometimes.
Okay, let's start getting to the brass knuckles here.
The playoff. Oregon or Alabama, right?
Georgia's still alive.
Well, yeah, Georgia, if they
Georgia wins out there. But when you look at when you start cleaning the deck, we think we know how most of it will end up. But I want you to analyze the Georgia-Alabama debate. Excuse me, the Oregon-Alabama debate, assuming that's what it is 2 weeks from now.
Boy, I'll tell you what, Paul, that's going to be really interesting because there's going to be a common opponent. And what happens if Alabama wins at Auburn? Because Oregon lost to Auburn on a neutral field. Now, you can make a couple different. If you want to go Alabama, you go, well, they played the same team. Alabama won, Oregon didn't. But if you're on the Oregon side of things, you say, well, you know, Oregon played a better schedule. And that was then. And we think Oregon's better now because Alabama doesn't have their quarterback anymore.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways. And then to really complicate things, and it's just, this is the way it's happened. The College Football Playoff Committee chairman is the Oregon athletic director. And so you say, see, look at you. That's beautiful. Quite a deadpan. So, and listen, Rob Mullins doesn't strike me as someone that would go in the room and say, hey, I need you to vote for the Ducks. But on the outside looking in, you're going, wait a minute. The guy that heads up the committee that votes is from Oregon, and Oregon just got in over Alabama? I mean, I was talking this morning. I was on an SEC Now program this morning. They said, boy, that'd almost be like, I said, if Georgia didn't get in and Florida and Georgia Tech and Oklahoma had somebody, yeah, we've been there and we've seen that. That's the problem with having the sitting athletic directors. As honest as these guys might, I said this, Paul, and this is maybe too political, but like, if there's a world committee and we pick rulers from 13 countries to decide what's good for the rest of the world, if the United States doesn't have a representative, do you feel good about it? And Canada and Mexico do, and they go, you know, about those borders, we want to draw them up a little different. It's hard when you don't have somebody on that committee and one of your perceived rivals does, or someone that you could look at and say, you know, they may have an interest in this. That's what's happened as a result of how this
yeah, listen,
works.
I mean, I follow you on that very clearly. I wonder, though, if we're ever going to get away from this, because the commissioners essentially control this.
Yeah, I think eventually you have to. When the television executives decide that this thing has run its course and that there needs to be a change.
And we forget ESPN is a pretty important partner in all
well,
this.
It's a pretty important part of our lives. Let's face it. In the world of sports,
especially though in the college football playoff.
Well, ESPN's done incredible things with sports, and I'm not here to second guess decisions they've made because it's an incredibly successful network that I've enjoyed throughout my life. We all know more about sports because of the move that ESPN made way back then.
Right.
We're in a transition time for college football right now. This thing's not going to last. And, the BCS was modified. If you remember, it started out with 3 computers, and then they went to 8. This system will be modified, and the first thing they need to do is remove the sitting athletic directors. Not because they're not honest and intelligent men. They are. There's a reason they're running these universities. These are great people. I would vouch for every one of them on a personal basis, but they're in an incredibly unfair and difficult position when they go into that room and have to make these decisions. Because in the Alabama-Oregon case, if Alabama were to beat Auburn, there is no right decision. They are both deserving. Somebody's going to leave upset.
I mean, you have argued a couple of times that you do think whether they recuse themselves or not, they have influence in that room.
Well, the problem is they're recusing themselves when their team is talked about,
right?
Not the team that they're competing with is talked about.
Okay.
So when Oklahoma's talked about last year, the Oklahoma AD left the room. But when Georgia was talked about, he's still in the room.
I see.
As long as Oklahoma's not in the discussion, which, of course, I mean, that's where the whole thing gets gummed up. And then you're not talking about a committee of 13. What if Joe Castiglione is the most influential guy in the room?
See, that's
and
the
he
key,
leaves
I
the
think.
room, somebody else jumps in there, and the discussion changes.
And I've always wondered, you have Bill Hancock, who is the executive director. He's a regular on this program. In fact, I talked to him today.
Great man. Yeah.
And I have a hard time believing that Bill, after all the years of doing this, doesn't have some influence in that room.
Well, he should.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, he should, because he is probably one of the most respected figures, if not the most respected figure universally in college football, whether we're talking
and listen,
coaches,
we're all human
administrators.
beings. If you're on a jury, you're looking to the foreman for guidance.
Simple solution.
He's the foreman.
Make it transparent. You want ratings, you want attention, you want transparency, then put a microphone in that room. Let's hear the discussion. You feel good and you feel honest about your decisions.
Why do you think
and
I've asked Hancock this question many times, why do they refuse? I understand maybe during the process, but there's no excuse for not having transparency at the end.
Well, it's hypocritical because on the one hand you're saying that these people aren't influenced by anything other than what's right, but on the other hand you're saying but we're not willing to do it publicly because we don't want to worry. We're worried about the potential repercussions and people not voting the way they would vote if they had an audience or if there was some pressure from the outside.
I think here's what we ought to do. We should do this live in front of 1,000 people.
Right.
I mean, it would be like the Roman Empire, where the guy said, Georgia doesn't deserve to be in there. People start booing.
You better find a neutral site outside the SEC. I think it'd be a little hostile in the SEC. You might need to move this to
I want the
Kansas
television
City
gig.
or
I want to be the host of that show.
It would be incredible. But of course, it's never going to happen. And this is the system that we have. And people say, well, what's a better system? And I say the one that you had before, that Roy Kramer devised and they modified, where everybody knew as the season progressed what mattered and where they needed to improve computer points, and your schedule mattered. I mean, let's face it, Alabama, schedule in Western Carolina, whenever this schedule was made 2, 3, 4 years ago, probably seemed like a pretty good idea. But right now that Alabama is scrapping and fighting and wanting to prove they really belong without Tua, they could really use a decent opponent this week because they could beat Western Carolina by 60, and we're all going to go, who cares? Oregon just beat Arizona State. It could cost Alabama in the rankings this week. If you listen to Mullen's words, he said, and this is what we felt this week. They weren't going to penalize Bama for losing Tua because they still won convincingly.
You have Alabama playing Western Carolina. You have Oregon on the road at Arizona State, which is a decent game. Alabama certainly would be benefiting by playing Arizona State this weekend.
Well, it's tough. We get back to what deserves to happen or who's best. Those aren't necessarily the same thing, and yet we've seen the last 2 years one team deserved. Oklahoma got in with the conference championship, and the year before Alabama was one of the 4 best, and the logic shifts. And which one is it? It's like when you vote on your poll.
Because they're different people.
It's different people, and again, it's fluid. What we think right now may not be the case. I'm sitting here right now expecting Georgia to win by 6 points
tomorrow.
6?
Just 6, because the rain, the weather, conservative, which conservative doesn't necessarily mean negative. Conservative can be smart. Jake Fromm's still healthy, and Georgia's still playing good football. But if Georgia goes out there and scores on the opening scoring drive, and A&M feels pressured, that Georgia defense, this Tyreek Stevenson kid and Tyson Campbell that are back, if they start feasting on A&M, I mean, this thing could get away from them. But it's fluid, right? And just like if Oregon goes out there and struggles with Arizona State, or if Alabama doesn't beat Western Carolina by 5 touchdowns, we're going to have questions.
We have more questions for you, but we'll probably continue this conversation in a couple of weeks when we see you in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You'll be there, won't you?
I'll be there.
I just want to make sure Georgia's still going.
Well, I mean, if they lose to A&M, they'll be there in body at least. I mean, we saw what happens.
Boy, that would be rough.
Whew, possible.
I want to think about it. Can't think about it. I can only think positively. Mike, always good to see you.
Appreciate it, Paul.
We made it through without any blows.
This time.
I'm happy about that. We'll take a break. Your phone calls.
Hello, everybody. Mike Morgan alongside John Sunvold. Great to be with you here at Rupp Arena. And, John, already this Kentucky team has shown some highs and some lows a little bit as well. It's a mixed bag of emotions thus far as Coach Cal and company try to find who their alpha dogs are. It's been a lot of balanced scoring.
Well, let's go to the normal facts. It is November. It's Kentucky. They've got young guys. But those young guys usually develop. And at the start of the year was Maxey. Game 1, everybody thought, well, he's the guy that will carry him. Remember, freshman. Maybe it's the veteran guy. Nick Richards, better games lately. Quickly has been very good lately. All of a sudden, Hagan's defense not only is good, his offense is better. If those things turn up, then we know the freshman will get better for this Kentucky team.
And, of course, not making things easier with such a young team and trying to find out who your best combinations are. There's been a flurry of injuries for Coach Cal's squad thus far. A number of players have been out of action, including E.J. Montgomery, who's missed the last 3 games with an ankle injury. He is expected to be back tonight. Could even start in this ball game for Kentucky. Emmanuel quickly looked good in practice today. For the first time in a while, Coach Cal is dealing with a full complement of players, and one of the best he has is the true freshman Tyrese Maxey.
Well, he made an impact in Game 1 against Michigan State, and when you do those things, the nation takes notice. But the other part is he is still young. He's developing. He's had a couple tough shooting nights, but I think he'll be good tonight.
Nick Richards, meanwhile, here's another guy they're glad to have healthy, and is really his game offensively, John, has flourished much more now in his junior year.
I think the coaching staff and the players realize if Nick Richards is strong offensively on the offensive end, they get him the basketball inside. He is a terrific scorer, great free throw shooter, shoots it well, not a three-point guy, but again, an offensive explosion.
I mentioned the term alpha dog at the top, and certainly Ashton Hagans has the potential to be just that now in his sophomore year. Much more aggressive, the defense outstanding a year ago. This year, more assertive offensively.
We know what he can do defensively. Now, offensively, he doesn't have to score the 26 points a night, but he has to get his guys involved. I think if this Kentucky team can push it, if Montgomery's healthy, if they can rebound, and they push the ball up the floor, not have to settle in a half-court game where everybody tries to bog them down, they're going to be terrific.
Assuming E.J. Montgomery is healthy and we start to see him be able to play at near 100%, what are we looking for out of him to improve the most?
Changes the game defensively for Kentucky. They can do a lot more things. He rebounds the ball well. They run better. They score more points. They're better on both ends.
Should be a good one here at Rupp Arena. Kentucky taking on Mount St. Mary's coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern Time.
The comeback of the week is supplemented by Aflac, who can help you tackle the bills health insurance doesn't cover.
Welcome back to Comeback of the Week, presented by Aflac. It's Missouri football at home this season. Missouri is holding its opponents to 67.8 rush yards per game. That's first in the SEC since 2010, when Tennessee is held to under 70 rush yards. The Volunteers are a woeful 3-19. That game tomorrow night, 7:30 on the SEC Network. And we welcome you back. Great to have you here in Athens as pitters of rain begin to fall. Tomorrow is supposed to be a deluge. Mike is in Macon, and you are next up.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for taking my call, and great show today. Really good show.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
The reason I called you was I had some thoughts when you had Tim Tebow on in the very first segment. And I was listening to him, and I was listening to him talk about, the quarterbacks and Tua and Jake Fromm and things like that. And, it just made me ponder about how much I admire Tim Tebow and how much I admire Jake Fromm and Joe Burrow and John Rice Plumlee and Tua. Anyway, I started thinking about a common denominator between all these guys. And the common denominator that I came to was they all have a testimony and profess a higher belief in other words, in a force bigger than themselves. Okay. So I wanted to call and talk about it because it made me so proud of what good people they are. And then something checked me and said, well, that's kind of getting religious, and you don't want to talk about religion on the show. Okay. So I'd about, talked myself out of calling and saying anything about it. And an hour and a half ago, my best friend from Dallas called me. And he's got a 2-month-old daughter, same age as your granddaughter. Anyway, she's born with Down syndrome, and he's at the emergency room. And she may have to have open heart surgery in the next few days. We don't know yet. She's going to have it sometime in the next year. But anyway, to make a long story short, it was just to tie in with that. These guys, their belief in a higher power. And the first thing I could think of to tell my friend was Tua's text. And he says, God has a plan. And so when my friend told me that, I said, Alec, God has a plan. So anyway,
Mike,
I
appreciate you sharing that, and I certainly, I think we all are prayerful that a good result happens. I was at one time in my career very reluctant, but I changed, and it turned out I became friends with quite a few different ministers, and I found that just talking, when you connect faith and athletics. It's a little bit different than trying to politicize it. I mean, there is a purpose behind it, and I found what Plumlee said here the other day about Tua, one of the most moving moments of the week. It was just so resonant, and so I really I'm glad you brought it up. In fact, and getting to know Tim like I have heard more people that know Jake Fromm compare him from a leadership standpoint to Tim Tebow than any other person.
Well, there's a lot of similarities. And, Paul, I'm not trying to say it's a prerequisite to being a good person or a great football player or anything else.
It's not.
It's just, I just saw it, as a common denominator. And
no, listen, absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up, though.
Okay. Can I ask you for a quid pro quo real quick without the pro quo?
I do not do quid pro quos, but go ahead.
All right. I'll just do the quid because I don't have the pro quo. When you do see Tim, would you ask him to please pray for Kennedy in Dallas, and I appreciate it.
I will pass that along to him. I sure will.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the call, and I think everyone will. Booby is up next in Alabama. Where else would you find a Booby? Hey, Booby.
What's going on, Paul?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Hey, I was wondering what you thought of, I know South Carolina says they're keeping Muschamp, but says he gets fired next year, that, they don't keep him. What do you think chances Saban might bring him back, be defensive coordinator maybe?
Yeah, I think if Muschamp were to leave today, or next week, and maybe he, I think Saban would be on the phone to hire him. I don't think he'd be the only one on the phone to hire him. I think Muschamp would be heavily in demand to be a defensive coordinator. So, yeah, Nick Saban's always looking for the best possible coach, and Will Muschamp would be the best possible coach.
I appreciate it. Can I ask you about the scheduling? Well, everybody's giving Alabama this crap about the schedule, their schedule's weak. Is it really any different than, Ohio State's or anybody else's that play these cupcakes? Everybody's playing them. It's not like people are just lining up to play Oklahoma and everybody else. I don't see what the big gripe is as far as everybody, Alabama's schedule and everybody else is pretty much the same.
Listen, to criticize Alabama this week for playing Western Carolina while Georgia is playing Texas A&M is absurd. Georgia played a different schedule this year than everyone else. They played Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech just doesn't happen to be a particularly meaty opponent. But Alabama always has the same schedule. They play the one big game early, and then they play a decent game, and then they play a terrible game at the end. That's how they do it. But next year they start with thank you. Next year they start with Southern Cal. I think they'll make up for it. Appreciate it, Booby. Mo is up next in Georgia. Hey, Mo.
Hey there.
This: if Oregon has one loss on their resume and it's to Auburn, and they beat a top 7 team in the Pac-12 championship, and they're a conference champion with only one out-of-conference loss against a Power 5 dominant program, really good program at least, then I think it needs to be Oregon. But other than that, look, if 4 best teams, I've always been one of those guys. If they still believe Alabama's the 4th best team, if Georgia were to lose, then so be it. But ultimately, I would put Oregon in or Utah in if either one of them won their specific conference, the Pac-12, with a top 7 win. And if I'm Oregon and I'm going into Arizona State primetime on ABC, that's probably a team that's got a bad 5-5 record that you just don't want to be dealing with at this stage of the season, because everything Herm has done, minus one game, and that was Utah a few weeks ago, they've kept every game close in his tenure at Arizona State. They have talent. It's young, but Oregon needs to be careful. And I'll say this, Utah probably needs to be careful because we've seen Sumlin clip a couple people when he shouldn't. So these are these scary weeks. Oregon, Utah, Georgia's another one against Texas A&M. These are teams that if you've got playoff aspirations, be careful the week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of all those. It would just seem to me that maybe Georgia would be the most vulnerable. They're already thinking about the championship game. They're coming off a tough win against Auburn, and here comes A&M, which, yeah, I mean, on paper, it's hard to really get carried away until you start looking at who they've lost to.
Well, I think they've won 7 in a row, and they haven't really beaten anybody good, but they've beaten teams that they should. And they've got a tough schedule. They've got one of the toughest schedules in the country to the Aggies. And you have to think at the end of year 2 for Jimbo Fisher, they're going to get somebody.
We welcome you back. Glad you're here. And a couple more calls to go as we wind things down. Let's check out Lance next. Hey, Lance, good afternoon.
Hey, Paul, how you doing, sir?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Hey, first of all, I want to say I'm glad that you're feeling better, and I'm glad that you're taking my call.
Thank you.
And,
my pleasure.
And my question is this, Paul. So a lot of people think that Texas A&M doesn't have a chance to actually beat Georgia. But I guess that I would go back to when A&M came into the SEC and they stunned Alabama when they had Johnny Manziel at that time, because Alabama never seen an offense like that before. With this being the first time Georgia playing Texas A&M, who's never seen an offense like this before with a mobile quarterback like Kellen Mond, what are your actual thoughts about that analogy?
Listen, I mean, if you want to put a team on upset alert, I was talking to somebody earlier, of the big teams, you know, who has the better chance or the best chance of getting upset? Is it Ohio State at home against Penn State? Is it Oregon at Arizona State, which is a 500 team? Or is it Georgia here? And I think you could certainly make a case. It's probably Georgia. I mean, I said upset alert. That doesn't mean they'll lose. That just means it's a very scary game. I mean, I was sitting an hour ago next to Kirby Smart. He knows how difficult this game is.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, once again, you know, because I'm a big A&M fan, and of course I'm in the Alabama side. I see a lot of Alabama fans as well, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because sometimes it seems like when you have not ventured into the unknown, you don't know what the results may be, and we just automatically think that well, Georgia they're a good team, they're a playoff team at number 4, but once again, it's like anything can happen on college game day.
I mean, Georgia is coming off an extremely difficult game, and I think that it takes a toll when you go to Auburn and win an emotional game. And listen, I've only been here for a couple of hours, but it's hard to really. This is not a natural opponent for Georgia. It's not like Auburn's here or Notre Dame is. I mean, there's only so many times you can get up for a game, and Georgia's already had Notre Dame and Florida. And the South Carolina game, they were flat. So there is some precedent this year.
Okay. Well, once again, I just want to get your thoughts, and I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad you got my call.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to hear from you. Kyle is next in Louisville. Hello, Kyle.
Hey, Paul. How you doing tonight?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Hey, it's been a while since you and me talked. Last time you and me talked was back in 2015, the night before American Pharoah was going to win the Breeders' Cup when you were in Lexington.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Paul, I got a quick question for you. Who do you think is going to win a national championship first, Coach O or Jimbo?
Wow. I'd probably lean toward Coach O, considering the odds are greater that he could win one here in about 7 weeks.
So you think that he has the inside track this year, but say they don't win it this year, you think it's going to be still going to be Coach O?
I made a prediction when Jimbo got there that he would win a national championship, so I'm certainly not backing away from that. But I think right now LSU is a little bit better suited to win one than A&M.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Paul. You have a good night, and shout out to the Beaker SEC fans, and gig 'em dogs this weekend, I guess, huh?
Thank you. Really do appreciate it. Listen, Jimbo Fisher is a great football coach, and I know sometimes we forget that because he's been in a transition. But next year, to me, is the year that he has to start showing it. And by the way, next year could be this year over the next 2 weeks. Sean is up next. Sean, you're on the air. Good evening.
Hey, Paul, good evening. So this game Saturday is not that interesting. You all know that. The third round of the state playoffs got more people's attention. But you definitely have always been a Barner. Do you think Auburn has a chance now that we ain't got Tua as a quarterback when we go down there?
So you just got through accusing me of being an Auburn fan. Is that right?
Paul, I've always said you're a closet Barner. I mean, look at how you just, are so intense to continue to throw muck at Saban for Tua's injury. It was the second quarter, Paul. Come on. For one loss? Ooh.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I'm always glad to be accused of being something. So thank you very, very much, Sean. Great to have you on. Okay, we're toward the end of the show, and we're starting to feel benevolent. So why don't we talk to our friend in Red Bay, Alabama. Hello, Joe.
Good afternoon, Paul. And, hey, I'm glad they got you a jacket there. But, hey, you as much of a closet Barner as I am. There ain't no freaking way. And I do want to say this. I know somebody said something about third week playoff. Hey, Red Bay Tigers is 12-0 playing tonight at 5, which, if you know, I'm pretty sure you know where that is, over close to Fort Payne, which they're 12-0
sure.
also.
Absolutely.
And my great-nephew's playing, so, hope everything goes good there. But, I would like to see A&M win, but I don't see no possible way they're going to beat Georgia. I mean, I really don't, because Georgia, their defense, and we know how Kellen Mond struggles when you got a good defensive front on the backside. And that's where Georgia is going to knock them out. And it really ain't got much on that.
Joe, thank you. Good luck to your son. You're a great nephew tonight. We're out of time. What a show. Kirby Smart among our guests. Good night from Athens. Disastrous football Saturday in the state of Alabama. Certainly Auburn losing, but it was all about Tua. What happened a few miles away in Starkville, Mississippi, still has most of the sports world talking.
LSU defense will cost them the national title. Is that low-hanging fruit?
No, I think that's pretty accurate.
If the hot takes come out trying to blame Saban or Tua, just stop. You're just furthering your agenda. And the truth of the matter is this. It's very simple. It just sucks.
I'm sick of your garbage, and I think the audience is too. But thank you for your call, though.
Hey, I don't understand. Why do all Georgia fans worry about other teams other than themselves?
I heard that you're going to be returning to Athens, Georgia this Saturday.
Cannot wait.
And I want you to be wearing those spikes.
I'd like to know if there's anything you don't do well. I mean, you're a really great baseball player. You're a great quarterback. You're a musician. Tell us about your musical skills.
I've been playing piano since I was in the 2nd grade.
What a great interview. Too bad the guy plays for Ole Miss.
Hey, Paul.
I tell you what, Lee, hold the thought. I apologize. I don't want to crowd you. Don't go anywhere. He's a Georgia grad.
There we go. Don't make me start barking in here.
Here's the way to get on this show. Say that the host of the show is the best you've ever seen. We'll put you right on the board. We promised you, if you say only good things about the host, we will share your tweets with the audience. Michael Divinity is not eligible until the national championship game. That my agreement is with ESPN.
Not with LSU fans?
No. Excuse me. Let me amend that. It's with ESPN and Alabama fans. I mean, I have to tell you, Greg, I was bored to death the day I was on the mock committee. Okay.
For the last 3 years, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and he shows up every single week.
What's worse is that behind you is my daughter, who should be in class. So now you're not only ruining my marriage,
So which?
but
Okay.
her education at the same
which
time.
one? She said this is more important, Mom.